Chapter 161, Natural Undead. It was a cinch to become undead. Any necrolyte could help to reincarnate the dead souls, necromancy, and even preserve their consciousness during life. The low-ranked undeads may have no intellect, but if a sword saint decided to be transformed into undead, as long as his body and soul were complete, he would not even fall below silver rank. Subsequent to the growth of necromancy, there came the easiest path to immortality. A strong one who had acquired considerable strength, would just need to approach the necromancer and sign a secret agreement before the end of life. Tempted by this immortality, every year in Zayuo Kingdom, there were secret visits from countless swordsmen in black hoods and sorcerers in a grey robe. These included quite a number of names which were famous across all countries. There were even some unknown ones who emerged as new powerful undead warlords annually. Even I, the demigod undead emperor, in conjunction with the most exquisite ingredients, could not guarantee a successful transformation of dead souls every time. Nevertheless, it was not a secret when it came to the methods of maximizing the success rate of undead transformation. The soul, all energies originated from the soul. It was the foundation of the world and was thus the key to increase the success rate of undead transformation. The transformation between life and death might sound miraculous and magical, but in the eyes of mine, it can actually be explained with logic and knowledge. Just like the living, the undead was also made of a body and soul, just that theirs may no longer be the original ones. A complete living being was analogous to a personal computer. The living was manufactured by the factory, with a perfect combination of software, soul, and hardware, body, along with the capability of auto-updating, growth in life. The undead might carry the same software after reincarnation, but its original hardware was definitely not viable anymore. The new body was similar to a computer assembled by several compatible parts. Its performance might be superb, but system collision and inexplicable crashes were very common with it. It was now evident how the undead transformation would fail, whether it be a collision between hardware and software, or the data loss of software, soul. The former could be overcome by changing another body, but the latter could not be saved. No matter how good a computer was, it was not able to read from a hard disk with a piece missing. No matter how important the contents of the hard disk was, how passionate and wild the performance of the actors was. It was just an example. Get your mind out of the gutter. Of course, the necromancer could have completed the soul by incorporating the souls of others, but that might completely change the contents of the soul. Besides, such mingled souls were susceptible to defects, as the present technology was not able to retain the vitality and memory of the souls for a long period. There was a 90% chance that a cobbled together soul might become retarded. Hence, the fundamental and imperative factor for a successful specter transformation was quite obvious: keeping the soul in its complete form. The undead always arose from the bitter grudge. Grudges, unresolved regret, were undoubtedly the culprit of non-dissipated souls, while the strong will, a pure character, would render the soul more solid, and thus increase the success rate of undead transformation. And then, the conclusion was obtained. According to my experimental theory, which contradicted the general idea, the success rate of undead transformation had nothing to do with the strength of the soul during life, but the will of one who had undergone hundreds of battles could never be weak, leading to a higher success rate of transformation. There were no deaths without casualties. Preserving more than 80% of the dead's memory was good enough. Taking the hard disk as a metaphor, if it had more than 20% of data loss, the hard disk, soul, would have 20% of unusable space. Speaking of which, the difference between national undeads and reincarnated undeads by necromancy was discernible now. Theoretically, they were the same. However, the will of natural undead was incredibly firm, and their character was pure to the point of no sundries. The grudge they held before death could stir up 6 months of blizzards. Their souls refused to undergo transmigration after death, and were not dissipated at all. Without requiring the guidance of necromancer, they performed the transformation from life to death on their own. This explained why the capabilities of natural undead were so astounding. Their souls had not dissipated at all, and were almost like their previous form. Moreover, having wandered across the boundary of life and death, they had discerned the arcanum of their own soul, developing a profound understanding of the basis of strength. Losing part of their souls, the growth rate of common undeads would be severely affected. There was an exception, however, which was none other than my 7 deadly sins. They were not strong at the beginning, but grew rapidly later. The common undeads had concentrated on the creation of strong undeads' bodies, hardware engineers, but I spent my effort on the soul, which was the foundation, software engineers. Of course, this was due to me being natural undead too, yet I had been to the sticks for several times. It was already difficult for the other necromancers to start dissecting the souls, as their level of expertise remained at the soul transformation theories on the blackboard. Therefore, they might have regarded the creation and assembly of the soul as the sole authority of the God of creation. And I had created and innovated numerous souls. These included bigoted and distorted souls, flawless, newborn yet talented souls, loyal and unyielding souls, and some which were completely reinvented with the souls of others as the ingredients. In a sense, it was right for Omar and Adam to call me their father. The perfect but bigoted souls had formed the basis of the incredible 7 deadly sins. Being the culmination of my research, their souls were flawless, coupled with the specially prepared bodies. They even outmatched the normal livings in their flawlessness and bigotry. In a way, they were the artificial national undeads. But actually, due to some flaws in my technique, in comparison with the genuine national undeads, their capabilities were lower by a certain level. After all, the natural specters I had met were all super monsters. These included I myself, Harl Ois, and Ayor. In mythology, the Valkyries would greet the Einherjers and bring them to Valhalla. Frankly speaking, they were not all too different compared to the necromancers. In recent times, the Einherjers below the sacred thrones had no fundamental difference with the artificial undeads as well. The disparity was merely that the gods performing the necromancy, which preserved even more the memories and battle techniques during life, under influence of the divine force. Everything arose from the soul. The Einherjar souls were already strengthened to its maximum. These looked good apparently, but had actually ceased the advancement of the Einherjers. The undeads were suffering the same fate. Disregarding the dazzling halos, the Einherjers and undeads had too much in common, and they were both incomparable to the national undeads. The natural undeads mainly existed in ancient times. In recent times, however, the resurrection rate of national undeads was negligible, as the soul of recent men were too fragile to attempt reincarnation, not to mention resurrections with complete souls. Aside from this, the hardest condition to satisfy was the furious rage, the unbreakable will, the desire of wanting to destroy the world. Suffering the destruction of our countries, me and Harlois were also the final royal descendants who witnessed the annihilation of our own people and kingdoms. You might say that we were undeads who remained in this world for the sake of vengeance. Ayor did not share what he had encountered, but it must not be anything good. Even when the conditions were satisfied, a certain amount of luck was required, so the figure of success rate started to count only after the decimal point. In consequence, in the perspective of recent men, the undeads were merely the undead reincarnated by the necromancers. Transformation to natural undead was never an option. Some necromancers were not even aware of the existence of national undeads. Hence, the reincarnation of Suana as a banshee was never known or expected by anyone. Perhaps even the elven gods, who were the brains behind all schemes, would not have thought of such a minuscule probability event. The pure souls were most likely to transform into undeads, and thus, female elves would be one of the races which could most easily transform into banshees. Ever since the reincarnation of Suana as a banshee, the title of Queen of Banshees was no longer exclusive to Harlois. In a sense, there were quite a few similarities between Harlois and Suana. Not only did they come to birth as elven princesses, they both suffered the betrayal of their most trusted people and gods, and their demises were also equally tragic, the sacrifice of war. Ironically, the fellow elven gods who were once supreme and ascendant, had created a godlike enemy like Harlois, as the undeads had more than enough time to investigate the truth. When everything was revealed under the sun, it would be feared that even Suana would arise as the next godlike enemy. Nevertheless, it had been a tradition for the elves and elven gods to dig holes for themselves and jumped into them. 1. The typical examples was none other than the Golden Elves and Lorsai, who had both triggered the extreme transition of the elves from riches to rags. And this time, if the fellow elven gods had turned into gods of chaos, Lorsai's actions, who was notorious for being incredibly vindictive, was indeed something to be anticipated. Back to the story, even though the humans had been gathering up for a final, defensive stand, with Maple City as the heavily fortified core zone, it would be futile to stop the group of a legendary warrior, a golden archer, and a natural undead elf. Ah, Mr. Skeleton is not here. Sister Elisa, how did you come back? Annie gave a sigh of evident disappointment, not only because Roland was absent, but mainly due to the return of Elisa. This false intimacy had Elisa stunned, with her eyebrows flickering. What did Annie mean, to ask about her boyfriend as soon as meeting her? Besides, was it like the previous fight they had never happened? I thought you would first ask about Adam and the others, they were here a couple days ago. For sure I know about stepfather and sister Margaret, I am always in touch with them. By the way, didn't stepfather tell you that I'm coming? Adam, a bastard as always. Suddenly, the picture of that man giving his big middle finger, like he always did, flashed across my mind, his face filled with a watching for fun smile. I did what I could, don't thank me. Alright, I certainly welcome all of you, but as you can see, I am too busy to entertain you. Pardon me for any offense. Outwardly, Elisa said so, but her lips deliberately uttered a soft grumble. An underworld autarch, an underworld beast king, sneaking out just like this. They are both very much adults, but simply ran away from their posts without letting anyone know. Don't they know the severity of that? Obviously, judging from her past experience, Elisa believed that these two people were not here for business. Most likely, they were just annoyed of their work and ran out from their houses after shaking off their entourages. Unexpectedly, an embarrassed expression was not seen. Instead, a triumphant smile was hanging on Annie's face. We are coming for real business this time, by the way. Still remember the manifesto the underworld people have the right to sunlight too? We are coming for this. So, going to war? This was the first response of Elisa upon hearing this sentence, the call for the right to sunlight. Wasn't this about the invasion of Underworld Alliance army mentioned in the Roland's prophecy? Considering the situation where Roland was still in East Mist, to battle against two sides was absolutely impossible. Elisa's expression immediately turned grim and unpleasant. But luckily, Anya intervened in time to prevent the atmosphere from getting worse. Most of the Beastmen war chiefs had requested to form an alliance for an invasion, but we are still assessing the possibility of concession. Concession? Yes, either purchase or rent. Lands without owners are good as well. This is the will of Emperor Roland. The most imperative part of it is to form a delegation to contact the possible buyers, and we are the front line of the delegation. Perhaps there was such a possibility. Suana did not talk any further after nodding her head. Nevertheless, the Banshee, who had been constrained since her entry, broke out of her silence. Roland? Are you referring to the legendary Holy Knight, Emperor Roland? You are? At first, Elisa supposed she was a random Banshee coming from the Sulphur Mountain City, but now it didn't seem so, as the Banshee was a high-rank undead, and a natural one was even rarer. Could she be the envoy from Zeluo? I'm Suana New Leaf. This name was the recent headlines, and was also the fuse of the war. Elisa definitely knew about it. She was first astounded by that, but recalling something later, she nodded her head, smiling. This is indeed interesting. Perhaps the cunning Lorsai would be pleased by your arrival. Oops, I was impolite for not answering the question of your highness. Yes, we were talking about Roland, the Roland who was a holy knight 300 years ago. Please don't call me princess. Now I'm no longer a royal member of the Tassel Kingdom, not to mention an elven princess. Gazing at the dejected Suana, Elisa was about to say something. Suddenly the guard outside the gate barged in with an excited look, like he had some important news to report. Lord Elisa, our reinforcements have finally arrived. To be continued. 1. TL note, in Chinese, dig hole for oneself and jump into it means asking for trouble. Chapter 162, Death Egg. Within the depths of the Great Snow Mountain, the sun was hard to come by. The sunlight shone upon the snowfield, bringing out the vast expanse of white even further, dazzling the eyes. Childhood is one's most treasured memories, and the duty of children is just to play well and grow well. From the games, they develop living abilities for the future. This is the instinct of life, and also an inevitable path to be taken by the young of all races. At that moment, on the snowfield, the children of the land of snow were chasing around and playing together. Hey, little snow, don't run. Only a fool won't run, come and chase me quickly. Don't run, I can't move anymore. Wahaha, little Rolly has no stamina, his legs are short and runs like a tortoise, loser, loser. Apparently, this group of naive and lively children were playing hide and seek, while the seeker could already move no more. Yet those children who were still energetic, was running around him. Just when he put his last effort together to start chasing, they suddenly scattered and fled in a blink. No wonder he could not catch up with them. Although they were still children, can his stamina compete with the child of snowman, the foal of an ice unicorns? Moreover, the young of a snow dragon and snow phoenix could fly. Watching the little friends running further and further away, the child who was the seeker started to laugh. He had chased them for the whole morning, and at that moment he was exhausted and hungry. Ha 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 ha, this is fun, my tears are coming out already. Continue to run, naughty brats, the seeker is coming to catch you guys. Eternal glacier bringing eternal destruction, the eternal darkness has descended, finally, the Ician will arrive. The destructive spell brought a dreadful magic wave, a blizzard formed in time. Laughing hysterically, the seeker started the preparation of a forbidden spell to destroy everything, although the target was just a bunch of naughty brats who were impossible to catch up with. He, there are two types of naughty brats, one tends to move around and one doesn't, the latter one is the good kid. Soon, all the brats will no longer be able to move, this is great. Personality correction kick. Following by a sudden struck of a huge fist of ice crystals, the forbidden spell Ician was interrupted by a sudden flying lion head. But the seeker who was sent flying away still managed to leave his last comment. What kick? This is your fist. You called your four paws legs? Do you eat with legs? Okay, I admit. This unlucky guy who was forced to be the seeker was me, and for these 3 days, I am doing the things I hated most in my life, playing with naughty brats. As a grown-up, but can't even compromise with children, and you dare to tell me you're going to inherit Raven Date's will. How many days only have passed? It seems like the descendants of Mist Kingdom are becoming more and more useless. I can't stand this anymore. I have played with those naughty brats for 2 days, I'm going nuts soon. Finding inner peace, you say? My heart is about to explode. Are you sure this is really useful to me? I am just getting more anxious. It was a mistake from the beginning, to listen to the Lionhead's nonsense. Playing with children with a smile can help in finding inner peace, you say? Maybe it worked for others. But to me, this was simply suffering in a purgatory. It made me sick. Already 3 days? Oh, then let's go to the next stage. The lion shook his head, then he made a new decision. Hell coming. Are you sure that you are not fooling me around? Why do I feel like this is just something random? Despite the giant size, this ice crystal lion had a rather Eastern name. This peculiar naming sense seemed to be the hobby of the first generation King of Mist. Actually playing with children for meditation purposes was just a prank. The actual target was to expose you to the scent of the young ice beasts, which was already achieved yesterday. Great. By hearing the word prank, I started to lose my temper. Then why didn't you tell me? You know how hard was it, to pretend to love building snowman, have snowball fights, and hide and seek, especially with these naughty brats who were so unreasonable, purposely going for the dangerous games, simply not listening, and treating me as their little friend. I can't stop thinking of throwing all these naughty brats into the cannon and firing them. Ah, everyone thought that you were playing happily with them. After all, you are a lot younger than they are. Their parents were very happy to see a foreign playmate, and seeing that you guys were enjoying. Therefore we decided to let them play for an extra day with you. What are you drawing your sword for? And why are you chanting the spell for? And at this moment, my mind was only echoing with enjoying, therefore we decided to let them play for an extra day with you. As expected, all naughty brats have parents without common courtesy. If so, let all of you turn into dust. O Eternity Glacier, listen to my rage. Passed on by the King of Mist. Personality correction punch specially for abnormal people. Ugh. Reinforcements? No doubt, this was totally out of Elise's expectations. The news of the defeat just spread, and San Antonio's reinforcements were still thousands of miles away. As the main force of the 5 northmost kingdoms were already gathered here, the second wave of mass mobilization will not appear in a short period of time, not to say any reinforcements. The lords are waiting for your arrival. They hope that you can join the reinforcement welcoming ceremony. Elisa was shocked upon hearing that, as the East Mist was not really in a good situation in the Alliance. Clearly they were in a marginalized situation, and also, the arrogant generals of big countries, would never be concerned for her in the Mist Kingdom. The fellow generals are waiting for you. This is allegedly the request of the reinforcements, as they refused to enter the city before meeting the deputy of East Mist. Afterwards, tons of news reached her ears, and from there she started to understand what was really going on. In that defeat, rumors had it that San Antonio's commanding general was severely wounded, and the command was taken over by Blackberry, who was also a San Antonian. Despite having lost half their forces, San Antonian was still the largest force in the Alliance, and East Mist was further marginalized instead. And now the new reinforcements clearly would not listen to them, and only took command from East Mist, and pained the Alliance generals from the bottom of their hearts. But as others had sent them reinforcements, they did not have any reason to refuse. At least they could not reveal the Alliance's poor collaboration, therefore they would have to pretend, and assigned Elisa as the representative of East Mist. Where did the reinforcements came from? The East Mist Kingdom is already having a hard time dealing with the monster waves, seeing that these reinforcements behave obediently in front of me. Could it be? The gaze of disbelief turned towards the two in the room. In a sense, these two were the super boss. Of course, from their smirks, one would never know how honorable they were. Not me. My accompanying army and the dragon guards are still waiting in the passageway. Without my command they will never come out. Great. Accompanying army? Dragon guards? In a sense, Annie was doing a lot better than her adopted father. With the support of Dragon Queen Xiaohong, in a sense, she was also a dragon princess, plus the retreat of devil forces in the underworld. Annie and the Luhuang Mountain City became the symbol of human forces that reign the underworld. Seemingly, Annie was getting increasingly better and being an empress. Elisa turned to the other, a centaurus who is a kitchen destroyer and a lightning rod of misfortune, who a while ago showed a smirk on her face. Currently, she was the leader of underworld beastmen, one of the 4 underworld autarchs. At least for now, she was on the same table with Annie. My ranger army and tribal warriors are also resting at the passageway. Together with Annie, I will be secured, and I don't want to cause any trouble, especially bringing an army that would limit my freedom. Well, she seemed to be honest, and she also brought her own army. Speaking of how her freedom would be limited, however, it probably meant that she would be severely restricted, trying to move about while being accompanied by an army. You too. For a while, Elisa's tongue was tied. What could she say? The two of them had now become the reputed underworld autarchs. It would seem awkward if they came to Earth without the escort of a few armies. You're not afraid of causing big trouble. An underworld alliance appearing on the outside world, moreover in the war zone. If this goes by the conspiracy theory, you can write a few legendary novels, like The Dark Conspiracy of Underworld Autarch and Beastmen, 2 Spies in the Sacred War, The Double Agent Dark Elves. Well, if Roland was here, he would have commented something like that. We never expect to see a war, that's why we left everyone in the passageway. With this chaotic situation, I wonder if they will be fine. Don't worry, as long as they don't come out from the underground passageway, nobody will go there. It's close to the royal tomb of the elves, even the superior elves are unable to get near to it. But actually, it was also a secret tunnel controlled by the royal family, and that is why I lingered there to hide from my people. With Suana's explanation, everyone on spot felt relieved. But after that, a new problem came. If the reinforcements were not from the Underworld Alliance, then who would it be? There were 2 groups of reinforcements which happened to come across each other and ended up traveling together. One of the group is the Alliance of Cheryl Autonomous Region and the Barbarian Tribe. They are here to support Lord Roland. Elise nodded when she heard that. Roland did mention the secret contract between the 3 places, but never had high hopes on them on sending support. After all, the Covenant was still in the testing stages, with a lot of uncertainties, and moreover, Cheryl itself had its own problems too. The second wave of reinforcements is here to support Lady Wren. They are Olander. It is said to be sent out by King Darsos, to thank Lord Roland on fulfilling the key agreement on time. PFFT. Listening to that, Elisa smiled, while Annie laughed straight away. There were things that cannot be hidden from the resourceful Annie even if not being told by Ronald, but for Annie who was always in the underworld to know, it would seem to be odd. Father mentioned to me before, was it that weird-eyed emperor who take a fancy to Uncle Bone? Seems like he is quite faithful towards Uncle Bone. But it is understandable, as Uncle Bone looked very cute when he was alive. When he was young he looked really like a cute girl. I wanted to give him a hug. When she heard the sign that Adam was indeed Roland's #1 bad friend, and that both of them never did anything good, Elisa burst into laughter. Annie, don't mention this in front of Roland, or else he will cry in front of you. If you force me any further, I will really cry in front of you. Hatch an egg. Are you crazy or am I crazy? I may look like this, but you can only complain it to my mom. I'm actually a male. No, I'm a guy. Look at this. I am a guy. How can I hatch an egg? My roar was echoing within the cave, traveling far away. The reason? The lion in front of me suggested a new training plan. Hatching it is your second step of training. And because of this purpose, I exposed you to the young scent of the ice beasts. That was a black ice crystal. From that mild chilliness and the magical engravings, it should be a frigid nightmare's egg. But, wasn't the frigid nightmare's egg supposed to be white in color? This is a death egg. All this time it never successfully hatched. Theoretically, it should have been dead. But looking at the magic engravings and ice crystals, you will know that it's still alive. Isn't this one of you? Can't you just hatch it by yourselves? 370 years ago, it did nearly hatch once, but after that, no matter what we did, it won't even budge. I was stunned when I heard this. At this point in time, it made me think of something bad. Twins are the most miraculous existence on this world. They are classified into many types, and one of them is the rarest, but is the true twins amongst twins. The wavelength of their souls are the same. It is like they were originally the same person, just that it is a soul that has been torn into two. Enough. I started to roar, but then stopped. What was I angry at? What caused the bottom of my heart to be in such panic? But the lion head seemed to hear nothing. He just continued explaining on. The Gemini of misfortune? It should be the Gemini of luck. There is always a special linkage between them. Moreover, they are the best corresponding partners. Oh yeah, by the way, this egg is also Arabella's brother, or sister, who knows? And it was also sent here by a descendant of the mist, and I don't need to mention his name. At this moment, if there was a mirror, I was afraid of how pale my face would have been. I have finished what I have to say, the rest is up to you. Chapter 163, The Old Soldier. Ha-oot. The citizens of this middle-sized city showed a vacant look just as the war horns were blasted through the freezing wind. Although the news of the Alliance's defeat had spread, none had expected the beastmen to come so quickly. Moreover, they retraced the routes that the human armies had taken, just to remove their opponent from play. Gigantic battle beasts marched from the shadows, and hill-sized dragon war turtles shook the earth as they neared the city. On the massive shells stood pale battle fortresses. From within, the sound of war drums and war horns could be heard. The gigantic war turtles were quarter dragons by bloodline, and the spread of their massive bodies was not any lower than city walls. These were the beastmen's most terrifying siege weapon. Doomsday Turtle. The Bear King is here. It's his white-tailed battle bear army. Not many dragon turtles exist in this world, but only the one owned by Bear King was packed with a fortress. It was named Doomsday Turtle, and was Bear King Dun's mount and also his moving fortress. Behind it, the quietly approaching behemoth could not be ignored. One by one, they walked out from the shadows, transforming into an actual nightmare. The beastmen were planning to make it a quick battle from the fact that they were sending out their trump cards from the start. Behemoth, a behemoth army. We're finished. Everyone, run. The actual immediate threat was the dragon turtle, but the one bringing the greatest fear was nevertheless, the docile-looking behemoth. They were far less robust-looking compared to the dragon turtle, and they did not roar like beasts due to the quiet nature. Dragging their 3-meter-long sharp claws, they left a ditch on the earth, quietly moving forward, like a group of marching lazy boys. Their sturdy gigantic arms, the thick hair standing straight like a gorilla, and under the thick hair, were a pair of fearsome eyes. From the looks alone, they were far less scary than the dragon turtle with horns and fangs. Instead, they looked a little dim-witted. But reputation preceded all else, so nobody would ignore these fierce giants. Their silence was only to accumulate strength for their outburst. A true war beast does not have the habit of roaring, but only when the flesh and blood fell onto their gigantic claws. They will bask in the rush, and reveal satisfied smiles. These are the wildest battle beasts on Earth, the number one species in land battle. Although that number one land battle beast still had a lot of rivals, but rest assured that they lived up to their reputation as the wildest battle beast. By only showing their presence, it had already terrified the city folks. Although the army only consisted of 3 behemoths, it was enough to sweep the north clean. Clang! Hoot! Surprisingly, the gigantic beast stepped onto the back of the dragon turtle and with a powerful stomp, using it as a jumping ramp, it took another step and landed on top of the city walls, like agile monkeys. Giant beasts who were not any shorter than the city walls but were as agile as apes. Just like that, the ferocious battle beasts crossed the strong walls, but by the footprints left by them, it seemed like before the strength of the behemoths, the sturdy 3-layered concrete city wall were not much different from mud piles. After the gigantic behemoths entered the city, the silent beasts finally started to grin. Under that crooked face, they showed their strange teeth, each molar as tall as a man, bringing great terror. Blooming from the center, causing internal damage, simple but effective. And this was also the speciality of the white-tailed battle bear army. They did not use the commonly used adding oil tactics. Instead he practiced a direct breakthrough. Faced with these tough behemoth vanguard, when the gates were opened by the behemoths and the beastmen entered, the individual strength difference would finish the rest. Dozens of cities had already fallen by such methods. When one of the gold-haired behemoths started to open the gates from within, the other 2 silver-haired beasts started their wave of destruction. The shivering humans could not even bring out anyone strong enough to stop the behemoths. Strong individuals no doubt dwelt in the city, but who would be foolish enough to try opposing an entire army? The grinning beastmen could already see the future. It just like the other cities. Wherever the fearsome battle beasts went, people would scream and flee in all directions, and the mighty army would step into a city which offered no resistance. But this time, there were some differences. Some stood their ground. An old soldier stood at the city gate, his rusty chainmail covered with dirt, and his brandy nose turned red under the freezing wind. The old soldier did not charge towards the gigantic beast insanely, he did not even try to stop it, but only stayed where he was. And in that chaos, he still caught the eye of the behemoths. Where he was standing happened to be the way the gold-haired behemoth needed to go through. The gigantic beast seemed to find himself challenged, and in a frenzy of rage, the beast's eyes turned blood red, charged towards the old soldier. "Old Soak, you're mad. Run now." He was not the general of this city, just an old soldier from the city defense army. Old Soak, yes, this was his nickname, and was also his code name. The reason is that he loved to have a quick drink in the pub after his duty. Even while on sentry duty, he would definitely be carrying cheap wine in his arm. "Old Soak, aren't you afraid someone will have to pull your drunken corpse from a drain pipe someday?" Every time, when someone made this joke, the old Soak would pat his belly, and laugh with his mouth wide open, showing his yellowish teeth. "Come on, as long as old Buck gives me bottomless dry gin, I will choose to die in the drain of your house tomorrow." At this moment, as if he did not hear the shout of his colleague, old Soak rubbed his nose, his blurry eyesight still staring at his own wine bottle. "Bah, this ale is just as bad as usual. How much water did that bratty little Buck had?" "Perhaps it is water mixed with a bit of ale after all." "Hey, seems like he is losing his conscience. Old Buck is still more honest." After tasting this 3-copper-coin pot of diluted ale, Ike narrowed his eyes. It was as if he had returned to the past, at that time, when his brother and wife were still there. Although the dry gin in Buck's bar was also bad, at least they served sufficient portions. But during that time he was not called an old Soak. Arrow of Kashgar, Ike was a well-known elite ranger, before he was transferred to the city defense army after he took an arrow to the knee. He was a famous bad A. Somehow it feels like, something has changed. Although the weather was still as freezing, the pay was still as low, the ale from the old Buck's pub was still as bad, but at that time, his life was considered well. Perhaps it was because those old bastardies and old sods who accompanied him were still there. DMN, these good-for-nothing beastmen and the useless nobles running away even before the war starts. Little Sindon, I'll soon see your dad in hell. The things I'll say to him, he'll spank your butt when you join us, just like old times. Why, when you grow old you will start to recall these useless things. While pondering on how to complain to his former, now deceased superior, the old soldier drew a rusty standard iron blade. Puff! A spit of the ale, the wet long sword finally shone with dim light. The gigantic beast was already in front of him, but the old soak who was shaken by the earthquake set his helmet slowly. Old Sindon said, "We soldiers are the face of his lord, we need to be aware of our appearance as we charge." Oh yeah, I remember it now. During this moment, we should shout that line. What was that again? A gigantic arm which could easily crush a bridge reached his front, and the old soldier stopped pondering. He shouted the line and started to swing his sword, with the full weight of his heart and soul. The sword that he gave all of him, bringing an arc of light, a faint blade door appeared. This was the highest level of power Ike had achieved throughout his life. Slap! But with this absolute strength difference, it was not something that could be made up for with fighting will. The steel claw of the behemoth fell, and the only thing left was a lump of meat sauce and some blood stain. Perhaps startled by the old soldier, or due to the fact that the old man actually punctured the skin of the beast, the gold-haired behemoth slowed down and stared. After having a good look at the corpse of the old soldier, only did it continue to hunt down other deserters. The old soak was dead, and died in a terrible way. He did not have the power to defeat the enemy, nor did anyone witness his final, valiant act. His death did not rouse the morale, nor did it turn the tide of the battle. This is war, there are no heroes, no miracles, only the bloody strong ones will prey on the weak ones. But when he died, his last charging slogan still echoed in the air, carrying afar by the cold air. The spirit of mist will never yield. You murderers. You are the beastmen's accomplices. As before, it was the old theater that acted as the conference room, but this time, it was the furious Wren who was spluttering at the Alliance generals. After the news of the beastmen renewed attack spread, the joint conference of military officers from different countries had a meeting for the whole morning, but they merely started from blaming each other and progressed to brainstorming on how to fortify the defense of Maple City. However, they still did not have any intentions to send reinforcements to other cities which were attacked. Ahem, Your Highness, you should maintain your royal manners and keep calm. You see, now that the enemy is strong, the best strategy is to retreat, and you see, fortifying the defense and gathering troops for the final battle is the correct way for now. What happens to the cities and the citizens near the marching army of the beastmen? They are still waiting for our rescue. We can't leave them to die. But her proposal did not get any response. Instead, there were people mocking her on this. Why would you be so agitated over the matter of other countries? Be careful, others might think that you have ulterior motives. HMPH, can't even see the situation clearly. No wonder she was marginalized. If it was not because of Lord Roland's absence, I'm afraid that she wouldn't even have the authority to attend this. A princess should just be an ornament, better not to command blindly in a war. Rescue? Do we even have enough troops for the final battle? From a tiny and weak country, plus her lack of reputation due to juvenility, she was faced with prejudice. From the start of the discussion, even the aggressive, war-pursuing factions were focusing on the defense on fortifying Maple City. Wren's opinion had already been ignored more than once. Her face turned red, but still she did not have any choice, and finally, she left angrily. Being marginalized? What is happening nowadays? In a sense, that guy's wild guess was near to the truth. Being marginalized, this indeed was Wren's concern. From some point, Roland purposely kept Wren away from important matters, and this had caused the internals of East Mist to make wild assumptions. If this had been done by others, Wren would have suspected if they had an ulterior motive, as if they had the ambition to climb to the top. But for Roland, who had no interest in power, nobody seemed to understand why he did that. He seems to have kept me from fulfilling any role. Thinking of her juniors who were busy in various aspects, While she was set aside, she couldn't help to stop thinking on these. It started when Elisa came here. I wonder what did they discuss about. If she was only bad-mouthing me, Roland wouldn't have been changed so easily. Furthermore, his attitude towards me did not change, so why did he isolate me? After putting some in thoughts, Ran faintly recalled something, but it was difficult to confirm it. Then suddenly the sky turned black, leaving her no time to think, and she immediately looked for shelter to hide. After just a few seconds, the clear sky turned into chaos. A huge flock of harpies tossed tar bombs down and retreated, driving the city fire brigade throughout the city. And at the same time, the city air cavalries had embarked, bringing down as many of the enemy as they could. Although unable to remove the enemy thoroughly, at least they would draw some blood in return. Your Highness, the generals request you to attend the discussion. Now that the beastmen are gathering up, we fear that they will soon bypass the barrier and attack the city directly. 1. TL note, in Chinese, sending troops slowly and increase them until the enemy is defeated. Chapter 164, The Puppet King. What is elemental magic? The combination of sophisticated incantations and baffling rules. If it's that difficult, how do we demon beasts perform it? We have not even inherited words. A warm voice was filling the hall, and the surrounding crowds were listening attentively. The body was so gigantic that even its borders could not be seen. Closing its eyes, in a slow pace, the ice dragon was passing down its perspective on magic. The way of magic. Magic is miraculous yet incredible, and way represents the rules and influence towards the reality. Together, they indicated the altering of reality by utilizing some incredible means. Nowadays, a majority of the accomplished magicians are undoubtedly human sorcerers, whose magic are derived from the elves. Of course, compared to the Elven Age, which revolved around the four elements, they have very much improved, but the methods and techniques of research are passed down from their ancestors. This becomes obvious as they put emphasis on all sort of sophisticated incantations and ceremonies. But I have to say, those complicated stuffs are not needed. A melodious voice was heard, as if it was carrying the musical notes. The Ice Phoenix rested above the head of the Ice Dragon. Being the pinnacle of the ice spirits, her mere presence had given rise to a light snowfall in the air. Those long ears are a bunch of paranoids. They are sensitive and bigoted, insisting that magic is a craftwork which could only be explained by words. They had created all sort of confusing runes, though they had actually made up something. Sadly, they had abandoned the origin of the magic from the very beginning. A thick voice filled with sarcasm and disdain had come in. The ice demon lion lay on the back of the ice phoenix. Although it was a giant itself, it looked like a kitten compared to the phoenix. The humans are learning from the elves, while the elves are learning from nature. Hee. The so-called nature, aren't they some natural magical beings and elemental beings like us? Sadly, they have not realized the foundation, and ever since the moment they adhere to research instead understanding, they were getting away from the truth, further and further. The will of gods is actually divine art, while the wrath of demon lords could reform the world. Even my beloved Ice Phoenix, Aeliven, could summon a blizzard across the entire mountain with a single glare. Aren't they altering reality by utilizing some incredible power? Those long ears always like to complicate stuff, just to lose sight of the foundation. Only by achieving legendary status suffices to condense one's seal of will. Only by acquiring the holy rank allows one to change the world with his or her will. Ha 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 ha, that's ridiculous, going a big circle just to come back to the starting point. We could have done this since the beginning. The warlocks carry alien bloodlines, and the unique tribes of all sort of talents. Aren't their miraculous powers considered magic? The definition from the elves is rather bigoted. So, all you younguns, abandon those unnecessary complications and arcanums. They are not for you. What you need to do, is just to build up your will to change the world, something like this. Listlessness. As the miraculous spell was lifted, the will of Ice Dragon descended. The tremendous force in the air could make one breathless. The boundless strength instilled fear in all livings on the spot. That was the wrath coming from the ancient times. The might of Doom Dragon? What is that? I'm just awakening my own presence. I don't care about the fear of those insects. When I glare, all weaklings must close their eyes. When I descend, all scoundrels must bow. When I am furious, All despicable ones must kneel down. My will, also my presence, I am the Doom Dragon, Akis useth. Beneath my ice wings, is the land where the doomsday will befall. The gigantic dragon gave a snarl, declaring his presence, and the entire mountain answered this by trembling in fear. Everything originates from the soul. Listen to the voice of your soul, and you will discover your own magic, the arcanum that works best for you. That might just be magic, but when you have truly understood it, it could be any kind of magic. As the ice phoenix fluttered its wings, the snows in the air were turning into various forms, should it be snow meteors, snowflakes, or snow blades. Luckily, they all would become just some adorable snow babies upon touching the ground. To one's surprise, the snow babies were jumping around and started to build their own snowmen. They were alive. To go by the terms of those witless elves, we have called this the premier magic. You may also call it as innate magic. It's not something to be attempted by the ordinary sorcerers, but is absolutely worth trying, for one has already condensed his seal of will, and thus is able to interfere the world with his will like a monster. Roland, you get it now? The snarl of the rowdy lion had made the world tremble. The reverberation of the sound had shattered the ice hills. The kings of the frigid nightmares were imparting to their youth the truth of the magic. Finally, I had known why those little devils would always run away from the lessons, and why the three elders were so delighted now. As their only audience, my face had remained thoughtful, but I was actually pondering over it. Can I ask a question? Ask. I know you must have a lot of doubts, as our theory of magic is totally different compared to what you were exposed to in the past. My son, relax your mind, we are not frightening. In a sense, we are even relatives. As I have spoken, the etiquette in the world of humans mean nothing for us. Speak out. Nodding my head after getting an affirmative answer, I decided to point out something I had been watching since the lesson begun. I am somewhat obsessive and afraid I will have a sleepless night without knowing the answer to this. The gaze of three highest ranked beings had rendered the air frozen. In fact, the air was actually turning to ice, and thus, I finally posted my question. Why must the three of you stack on top each other like the Buddhist tar hats? Do you think this is cool? And I find this interesting out of the blue. Can I stand at the highest point? I am very light. Is this even a main point? The gigantic dragon gave a slight quiver, which had triggered an earthquake. You two fools, what's with this three sages pyramid posture? And even forming a group of four heavenly kings with that whole tortoise in a lake. I have said that this posture is disgusting. This mentality is exactly the same as the old Mist King. A Mist descendant definitely. But no way. No one should stand on my head. Lionhead. Why are you standing on our heads then? Have you proposed all of this just to stand on top of us? With the two members at bottom retorting with the same voice, there came the joyous time of watching their silly bickering. Sigh, please mind your reputation before the juniors. Besides that, did you not perceive anything? In a twinkling, the ice phoenix flickered as a stream of light and reappeared in front of me. One has to be serious in choosing a nickname, and more serious in thinking of the opening line. Puff, what's with this Doom Dragon? That's too embarrassing. I am the Doom Dragon, beneath my wings. Alright, my lord, please curb your dragon rage. This name is fantastic, and doesn't sound like the idea of a sophomore one, at all. Not knowing what sophomore means? It is reputedly the moment when one being is so handsome that the rest could hardly bear the sight of it. Indeed, that is one's precious moment, the moment when one shines the brightest, which always brings out an excitement whenever one looks back. I suppose the nickname Sophomore Wings is meant for you. You like it? That's awesome, Lord Sophomore Wings. After creating the name Lord Sophomore out of fun, I turned to the lion head before me, smiling and waving my hand. The invisible cold air appeared to be dispersing. There was no spectacular spark of magic, and no stirring bang. Just the turquoise ice crystals whirling in my palm. Alright, thanks for your enlightenment, seniors. I have found it, to think that it was always within me. In a sense, I had gained a lot. The three pinnacles of the ice had led me to a new path, a path which was absolutely different from the conventional elemental magic. I could not wait to try out the new abilities I had mastered. Just when I was growing over my new insights, The silver ring on my finger started vibrating. The arriving news very much displeased me. Damn breath, unfilial son, imbecile. I will kill him. As the vultures of war were hovering in the sky of the Northland, some changes had taken place within Antone, amidst the army. Under the cover of the dark night, some figures in black cloaks had snuck into the castle. They were then guided by the royal attendants into the castle, furtively. Should they be gone with smiles before the daylight, everything would be different. Will of Mist. Ha ha. Never surrender? Bah. The scorn of men in black cloaks could still be felt in the air, but on a nearby window sill, a young couple was whispering, and their vision could penetrate through these buildings. How could this be? Haven't we pledged to protect the damn fatty? HMPH, he had believed in no god, would he believe us? Damn, how could this be? This has gone beyond Roland's prophecy. Should I wipe out all of them? Would it help? Unless you slaughter the damn fatty on the crown, no envoy could be sent off. Not really, even you have slaughtered him, that wouldn't help. We'd better get in touch with Roland. It's meaningless now, if my prediction doesn't go wrong. Very soon, this news would spread across the world and astonish all. How would Roland be if he heard this news? To think that the thing he had protected with his life was trodden under the feet of others, yet its head was spat on, he must feel terrible. What else could be done? You should ask what else the Northland could become. In a sense, Roland had been always fettered by morality and some evident rules. Should he be on rampage? Not only the Northland would be completely different, but the whole world will not be able to stop him either. As predicted by Margaret, the news had shaken the world on the very next day. Sloweaver Kingdom announced an unconditional surrender, indicating their willingness to be ruled by the Beastman Warchief, thus recognizing Imond Blood Ox. My stepfather, King Faema Carson, had even held harsh negotiations with the humans within his territory, for their troops to be withdrawn immediately, or else it would be perceived as an act of aggression. Shameless. How could one be so shameless? Those countries are coming to his rescue. Aggression? Can this be possible? The people of Mist have no history of surrender over thousands of years. Despite numerous times of being on the verge of annihilation, they had survived. This news must be false. The Mist Kingdom never surrenders. Reinforcements from all countries were pretty much in the dark. A moment ago, they were coming to rescue of their allies. In a twinkling, they became the intruders. Should this war continue to be fought? What was the purpose of our blood and sacrifices? The people of Sloweaver were feeling even more devastated. When they had decided to fight until their last breath, their king had however given in. Imperceptibly, they had become the people of a subjugated nation. Yet they had to banish their liberators. That was the deepest despair. The people of Mist, who was always proud of their unyielding spirit, had never suffered such humiliation. For the first time, they fathomed betrayal, despair and disgrace, severely. Even staining the face with mud doesn't feel so dirty. Some people said so, while some people had committed suicide on the second day. Never would they accept such sickening truth that their country had surrendered. Being so adamant that they would rather break their bones than bowing, they might be seemingly foolish, but that was the backbone of this race. And also, it was why they could stand up again every single time they were defeated. It was impossible for them to consider surrendering, even amidst the darkest impasse. Even though the Mist Kingdom had fallen 300 years ago, they were able to rebuild another Mist Kingdom. You can kill me, but you will never make me kneel. The people of Mist knows no bowing. We won't give up and won't be slaves. For many years, whenever they dealt with invasion from beastmen, devils, elves and other countries, whenever they reached the blind alley, this was the battle cry of the people of Mist Kingdom. They would risk their lives to fulfill their promises, and also due to this trait, they had been standing firm in the north of the continent. This time, the pain and sufferings while battling the beastmen were beyond endurance, but that didn't deprive the people of Mist of their resolve to fight until the very end. No matter how hopeless the circumstances had become, they always believed the final victory belongs to them, and their countries. Being in such a blind alley, however, they could still talk about the past and the present, and chuckle. You call this a dead end? We had experienced it for countless times. They still believed they would achieve victory, the knights would protect them, and the royals would lead them to the victory of glory and pride. Once again, those northern men know no despair. They are stinky and stubborn, Just like the frozen stone in the Northland, there is no way they could be subdued. The people of Mist considered this comment from the southern men as a compliment. No matter how many difficulties lay in front of them, they would never learn about despair, as they were confident that they would be victorious in the end. The world had always presumed the people of Mist would never surrender, but a letter of surrender delivered from the king in the distance had written a new chapter of history. The very first time, the people of Mist was deprived of their desire for victory. Seeing that bewilderment and disappointment in their eyes was simply heartbreaking. Some people had chosen to commit suicide in disappointment, while some had looked upon the man above the throne with hatred. We won't surrender, the Mist Kingdom won't surrender, that man doesn't deserve to be our king. If the news is real, he is none other than a puppet king. Right after that, another news had reached the ears of the entire Northland, staggering the whole world. But it had helped the people of Mist to regain their confidence and hope. I'm the descendant of Mist, Roland Mist. I now declare Faema Carson as a puppet king, and all the decisions he made have no credibility. Henceforth, I will make a crusade order, a vow of crusade. We will all raise the war flags of Mist. I hope all the people of Mist will fight along with me, to crusade against the puppet king. The spirit of Mist. Never surrender. Colloquially, it means, damn it. What's spoken by that bastard doesn't count, Famer, you scumbag, just wait, I will take down your head. The notice was short and was not properly legislated, but very soon, the people of Mist in the Slough had torn down their previous national emblems and the king's portrait, and replaced with a new one. Would they not know his facial features? His statue was in the center of all the city square. For so many years, he was never apart from all his brothers. Above the flag which had been risen again, it was still the same old fortress, standing firmly in the gale, but this time, the people were cheering a name. The Mist King Roland, our king has returned, our real king has returned, we have not surrendered. The people of Mist, never surrender. To be continued. 1. TL note, in Chinese, the word sophomore, roughly means, amateur but pretend to be cool and competent. Or as the Japanese would call it, Chonabiu. Chapter 165. Feast of the Traders. On the boundless ice field, the scenery appeared stagnant, and when the sun rose, the black horizon turned out to be an assembly of cavalry and warriors. The beastmen are here. After the simple announcement, the first wave of catapults and tactical magic started to perform their duties. The huge rocks soared through the sky, following a dreadful noise. Every time they landed, dozens of lives were taken away. Originally, the Maple City was just a normal double-layered wall city, but after countless investments from the other countries, it had been upgraded to a 4-layered wall fortress. Earth wizards may not have the strength and magnificence in attacking magic compared with other elemental wizards, but in civil engineering tasks, they would show advantage that other elemental wizards cannot compare with. One by one, high walls rose in a blink of an eye, followed by the chanting of turn soil to mud. The city moat was widened by 7 to 8 meters, and the alchemical venom that flowed within may not be lethal, but could slow the foe down. 1. At least the city walls were more than 3 times taller. On the towering high walls, it was full with ballistics and heavy artillery. Griffin cavalries were patrolling in the skies, searching for spots that might be missed. On each platform on the city wall, countless catapults were built up, such historical siege and defense weapons. As long as there are enough scholars and craftsmen, it will bring sufficient power. What difference is a huge stone falling from the sky and the meteor spell, when it would kill anything it hits anyway? Simple, violent, effective, low cost, were the reasons that catapults were essential in wars. But this time, the enemy had just entered the shooting range of the largest catapult. The distance was very far, it was impossible to hit precisely and pose a threat, but mostly it was just a type of deterrent. On the battlefield, there is no safe spot. Not to be outdone, the beastmen fought back. Mobile catapults had limited range, even the largest ones can barely scratch the city walls. Their projectiles raised some dust and rubble, and made the guards laugh. Not long ago, the rocks and boulders were already being cleared, and the usable stones were stored in the city storage as ammo. To find suitable ones for themselves, the beastmen had no choice but to bring in their own ammo from afar. And meanwhile, at the West City Gate, the East Mist Army was assigned there for defensive purposes, and as a temporary leader, Rand's palms were full of sweat. This was only the second time she encountered war, but as her first time being involved as a militant. Hold on, Ren. You can do it. In those years when Brother Roland went to the battlefield, he was younger than you are now. What she did not know was that as she encouraged herself silently, a few persons were keeping their eyes on her, while some kept on searching for the mysteries of the world through her eyes. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. This is something common, but there is also something called doing good with bad intentions, rare as it is. The coward Faema Carson's surrender brought Sluywer Kingdom great disgrace. He was the first of the descendants of Mist to surrender, nominally. At the same time, he was labeled as the clown of history. It was a very strange but important influence on the war. Firstly, due to the fall of the kingdom and the surrender of the royals, Sluywer was turned into the subordinate of Beastman tribe. Suddenly, the Castellan and lords of other cities and towns were lost. However, the Beastman army got to bypass the city-states, directly reaching Maple City, the core of it all. Why fight when we have already surrendered? The second influence had a deeper impact. That was the declaration of war against the Beastmen from the elves. Yes, they declared war. That silent alliance only lasted for less than half a month, and suddenly changed to a hostile relation immediately. This time, the elven king of Tassel did not show mercy. The human bastard chosen as the tipping point was a San Antonian. Moreover, he was a noble of the Carsummit communal country. He was also the one pulling the strings behind and a slave trader. Therefore, they changed their targets to Sluywer and the Carsummit communal country suddenly. After that, San Antonio, which was next by default, was not able to get off of this situation. His plans were good, and as long as the war went well, he could use the tipping point and escalate it to stimulate the grievance of people, letting the war continue spreading. Since it was all for the revenge of Princess Suana, who was the anti-war faction, the peace faction and anti-war faction could not disagree on this. But if the targeted chief culprit Sluywer surrendered to the Beastmen, and in the end was protected by the Beastmen instead, from which side should they get their revenge from? General Blackberry-Roe was quite sharp at times, and also quite courageous. When he knew about Peacedove's death, immediately he discovered the conspiracy. Right away, he removed the family of that bastard noble's name from Carsumi, captured his brothers and gave it to the elves, and added a genuine and sincere apology letter. Hearing of that tragedy, at the same time we grieved, we deeply regretted. We will never let the murderer run free, as he himself had already died. We hereby present his brothers and wife as an offering, to propitiate Princess Suana's soul in the heavens. Well, this was actually not very appropriate, and also shameless, but in a sense, it worked for the elves who were famously stubborn. The human kings also fathomed that these elves had proud nature and do not yield to strength but can be persuaded by reason. We offer a few unworthy descendants of a family, and we apologize sincerely, for the Carsummit communal country had already done a great job. By using a sinner's wife as an offering is no different from the barbaric beast man. If the news spread, it will affect the reputation of Tassel Kingdom and the elven tribes. When this kind of news spread out, the war-pursuing faction of Tassel Kingdom noticed that there was something wrong. In fact, the Elven Kingdom was the home to the administrative system and Congress system. In the eyes of the world, it represented equality, a symbol of peace, and the Elven states with different regimes were regarded as the kingdom of freedom, but the throne was comparatively weak. In the eyes of the emissary of the war-pursuing faction, if most of the elves had fulfilled their revenge, and wanted a truce with the alliance, then wouldn't Suana's sacrifice be wasted? How could this nonsensical ending be accepted? How could they face the elven gods who wanted to intensify the contradiction? While the elves were very particular about reputation and fame, wouldn't a war without a righteous cause make them evil invaders? How would the kind and peace-loving elves become sinful invaders? We needed to be on the side of justice. Our targets must be the wicked villains. Therefore, a report with completely solid intelligence was dug out. Within it was the proof of elf trafficking of recent years, and surprisingly those elf traffickers and slavers had official backgrounds. The arch-criminals or the one behind these directly pointed fingers at Sluywer, and their nobility and royalty. The truth was that when slavery exists in this nation, the officials actually turned a blind eye on it. When the bloody chain of benefits exists, how came the upper strait to be clean? Well, then it would all be the fault of King Famer. But speaking of the truth, from the fact that he kept hundreds of elven dancers in his palace, it surely seemed that he was not wronged falsely. In the eyes of the elves, they were not invading, and instead, they were exacting revenge and bringing justice. The evil kingdom of Slowweaver must pay the price. The evil humans shall be expelled from the land of elves. But then, the elves met some trouble. Slowweaver had surrendered. The people of Mist, who were stubborn mules, actually surrendered to these longevity tribe. It was beyond imagination, as if the elves had turned cheerful and magnanimous, the dwarfs turned clean and tidy, the beasts had turned educated and reasonable. The surrender of Slowweaver aside, the elves had to ask themselves if they wanted to continue with this idea of revenge. If they do not exact revenge, they just cannot let it go, and it would feel like they cannot face certain existence. If they chose on revenge, wouldn't it be an act of aggression towards Famer, which was under the dominion of beastmen? Would the beastmen willingly give up their hard-earned trophy of victory? Dumb savage beasts, hand us Famer and his filthy minions, we still can talk. Wait, why are you holding me back? Ah! The elven envoys were as arrogant as usual, causing a weak negotiation attempt to end up in failure. But this was also the outcome that some elven kings needed. To all high priests, please inform him that his will be carried through. Anzelo Sustade Telband, this tediously long name that was an abbreviation of itself. A lot could be said about his life, and he had a handful of names, but there was one adjective that could describe him well: elven god. The gods of order was composed of a mixture of various divine systems, and among the god-level existences, there were only 7 of them, proving how formidable he was. By the way, it was he who exiled Lorsai, caused the falling of dark elves, and the target list of Harloy's vow of revenge was also headed by him. As elven god and the guardian god of the whole elven tribe, how could the will of Anzelo be violated? And therefore the elves declared war upon the beastmen. They declared war towards the beastmen who attempted to protect Famer. As expected, the thought patterns of elves. I'm afraid that our elf study needs to be revised again. HMPH, the more intense the battle is, the better it is. It will be best if they slay each other. As the human militarists were raising their eyebrows, they were also looking forward to the comedy, but very soon they were to find that this declaration of war was just a pretense. When the beastmen gave up on other cities and focused on the final battle, suddenly the elves began the slaughter. But of course, in the dictionary of these arrogant elves there is no such filthy word. They prefer the term purge. The overflowing hatred was infectious, the bloodlusting madness spread with no end, and quickly, judgment was out of control. Any proof of nobles whose ancestors took part in slavery was enough for the whole family to be hanged. What? Your grandfather served as a mercenary before? And you weren't clear of where he made his living? I'm sorry, then if you cannot prove that he was innocent, that means he was guilty. And if he was guilty, you are guilty. The elven pastors served as judges also fell into an inexplicable fever, in their discernment of guilt and in the trial of implicated offenders. Rarely anyone escaped unscathed. The only merit compared to the beastmen was that they had not yet acted upon the commoners for now, or in their terms, they had not started punishing them. How is it possible for a war to have no casualties, facing their losses, with the so-called elven gracefulness, to let the city defense soldiers choose a not too embarrassing death? Therefore, all around the fallen city hung human heads. The commoners who survived by luck stared at these long ears with their eyes full of hatred. They are truly some frenzied warlords. I'm afraid that the northern elves will never return to what they once were. Maybe after this havoc, elves would be no more. But I saw sadness from the elves' frenzy. The only one who can lead the pastor's will was the gods, and since the gods did not care about dignity anymore, they themselves had already fallen into despair and madness due to the loss of their dignity. By choosing to betray the gods of order, by acting as the vanguard of the war god, in an era where vanguard is almost the synonym of cannon fodder, soon the collective fall of the elven gods will come. This truly is the feast of traitors. Even while saying such words, I was repeatedly reading the letter written to another betrayer, considering on whether or not to reconsider their stance that would directly affect the outcome of this war. Dear Lady Lorsai, good day. I am your loyal fan Roland Mist. You may have heard of me. I have always been intrigued by your art of interrogation, and would like to find a chance to learn from you. Omitting the flattery of 5,000 words, You should have heard of the recent happenings, and here, I have a little suggestion. Chapter 166, No One is Immortal. Among the snow coming down from all over the sky, there was an eerie laughter, and with lips that flapped out some peculiar and incomprehensible phrases, a visitor in silver robes was knocking on the door of the palace. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of his ring pounding the door was inconceivably loud, that it could reach the ears of the citizens, reminding them of a funeral bell. Bang, bang, bang. The knocking sound was reverberating, an intangible magic power could be sensed within it, which was quite vexing. Little Fizmer, are you there? Hee hee, I'm coming to play with you. The unwelcome guest seemed to be whispering below the city walls, his voices however, was able to transmit around to every room in the palace through an uncertain medium. King Fizmer woke up abruptly from his dream, a nightmare in which he was being pursued by a fierce demon. Right after that, the reverberating voice and eerie laughter rang in his ears. Hee hee, little Fizmer, I'm coming to play with you. That eerie voice was just behind him. In a split second, Fizmer turned his head, but it was just an empty wall. There was nobody there. Little Fizmer, I know you are home, stop hiding. This time, the voice came from the side. Fizmer stood up violently. He pulled out his sword from beneath the pillow and swung it towards the direction of the voice, just to find it directed at his elven slave, who was petrified. Just when the corpulent Fizmer was frightened by this spooky scene and took a deep breath, bang bang bang, the sound of knocking door sent him over the edge. Who dares to disturb me now? I have found you. Come, play together. That creepy and chilling voice rang up again. At this moment, Fizmer suddenly recalled that his room door was in front of him, while behind him, bang bang bang, the window was still making the banging sound. Under the pounding of a peculiar white hand, an ash-pale grinning face stared through the window, with a pair of glowing red crescent eyes. Wait for me, little Fizmer. I am coming for you. The more it spoke, the laughing face laughed even more gleefully. The grin got wider until it could reach the cheek, and now, it had actually turned into a scary demon face. That was absolutely not the face of a human. In a twinkling, an inexplicable coldness crept up everyone's spines. The surrounding slaves were shocked into fainting on the spot. Meanwhile, Fizmer was frightened to such an extreme that he threw down his sword, which was supposed to be his all-time lifesaver. Boom! The very precious elixir had triggered an explosion, and flames sprang up over all the place. Half of the room was blown up to the sky. Sow sow sow. Right after the curling smoke dissipated, the cold wind was drawn in, but nothing was left before the eyes. Seeing that the remaining room had become a terrace, however, only the snowdrops could be seen coming in, and there was not a single trace of the man who uttered the voices. The hoarse chuckle, again, rang in Fizmer's ear. Lives forever. No one lives forever. You can run, but you cannot hide. In the end, he still could not get rid of the eerie voices around his ears. The cowardly Fizmer was falling apart and even screamed like a woman. Guards! Guards! There's an assassin! Somebody wants to kill me! He ran naked into the hallway. The guards who hurried to the scene, looked incredulously at the most unsightly king. After running several steps in the corpulent body, he had collapsed on the floor, gulping for air. Subsequently, the screaming Fizmer pulled a sword abruptly from a guard and furiously slashed at the curtain, swinging with the wind. What are you looking at? There's an assassin. You bunch of junks, have you been bought over too? Want to kill me? I tell you, if I'm dead, I will take you down with me, I mean it. Seeing this, the guards and the knights were shocked. At the same time, their faces were filled with a disgusted, yet pitiful expression towards Fizmer. In their eyes, this man who had just reduced them from respectable guards to junks, had probably gone crazy. Why are you looking at me? You bunch of useless scum, should you be not so useless? I wouldn't have had to surrender to those filthy and worthless beastmen. It was all your fault, it was all because of you, bunch of useless idiots. The enraged king violently wielded the sword in his hand. His grounding in swordsmanship left behind since young was barely acceptable. However, before the knights, this moronic way of wielding the sword was meaningless. As they dodged the attacks without a hitch, they continued to look at each other, and then at the insane king, pitying him even more. Ha, ha. Very soon, Fizmer, who had abandoned himself to wine and women, slumped resignedly on the floor. Gulping for air strenuously, he was feeling short of breath. Unconsciously, he tried to pull something away from his neck, but unexpectedly, what he touched was not the flesh of man. That was a pair of ice-cold arms, grabbing him deadly by the throat, and the ice-cold breath had already reached behind his ears. It was still the same hoarse voices. "I caught you." The king screamed madly in terror, only to elevate the strange feeling of the guards. They could see nothing unusual except Fismer, who was flailing madly for no apparent reason. In their eyes, Fismer had suddenly squeezed his own neck, while screaming, yet rolling on the floor. His tongue had been squeezed out, but he squeezed himself even harder, as if he would not die. There were people who derived pleasure from seeing such misfortune, but most of the guards still rushed to his assistance. After all, as the bodyguards of the king, their reputation would vanish if the king whom they served loyally, died in such a ridiculous manner. But this time, they would very soon realize that Fismer was not just going crazy. Nor the entire wall was shattered by a brute force. The head of a huge lion formed by the frigid ice had come in. Its unspeakable majesty was as deadly as the pervasive freezing air. The visitor in silver robe on top of the lion, wasn't he the unwelcome guest who knocked the door just now? "Yo, no one opened the door after so long?" "Well, I came up here on my own." "Well, Buster, I told you, you can run, but you cannot hide." The guards acted as they were facing an incredible opponent. By simply swinging my hand, the ghostly blue phantom had risen from Fismer, and then they revolved around me like kids who yearn for candy. The flames at the back were rising, the gleam of magic had lighted up half of the sky. Along with the plan, it seemed that Adam and Margaret had successfully distracted the strong ones. Of course, I had seized this opportunity too. Hence, I drew my sword. As the blue phantom revolving joyously above the sacred sword of Roland, they transformed into a raging frosty sacred flame. Obviously, the way I pulled my sword had agitated the audience, so, shaking my head, I returned the sacred sword to its scabbard. Following the return of sacred sword to its scabbard, the blue flames finally went out, and the ghostly phantom was sent back into deep slumber, and even I had breathed a sigh of relief, as the power of this newborn creature was too unearthly, that even I felt uncomfortable with it. Ow, this power works so well in finding and scaring people. Unbelievable. Nevertheless, this moment was not the end. The royal guards were always the most refined warriors, and those surrounding us, was definitely the most refined ones. They stepped into a formation, protecting Fismer, who was at the center. The one who comes isn't kind, the one who is kind doesn't come. When I came, I had created a major turn of events. Now, they were no longer interested in merits, but only strove to avoid any mistakes, and prioritize the protection of their king before everything else. "You, who are you? Did that fellow send you to kill me?" Perhaps the guards had given him courage. To my utter surprise, Fismer was yelling at me. "You're half right, indeed I'm here to kill you, but, I work for nobody. It's just my very principle to clean up my own mess." And thus, I took off my hood, shaking off the snow, and smiled to him. Roland. He had, however, made a more piercing scream, which was quite impolite. Hence, I reached out my hand, and blue magic power radiated from my palm. The blue handprint had reappeared on the neck of Fismer, but this time, it directly dragged him towards me. In a twinkling, Fismer was dragged by the ghostly hand to me, and the surrounding guards had turned pale with terror, but still tried to snatch at him. The few royal guards, were, in fact, gold rank fighters, and they were charging in full throttle, murderously. However, what they were facing was not just me alone. "Shut up, you idiots." As one of the elder frigid nightmares, Hellcoming was the friend of the first generation Mist King. He should be around 1,700 years old now. His skills knew no bounds. A single roar had sent some unlucky knights, one by one, flying towards the wall. Looking at the useless man who was overwhelmed with fear, the flames of fury were rising in my heart. "You, a descendant of mist scum like you, the Mist King?" It was all due to his feebleness and selfishness, which led everything down the worst path. Should he have listened to the advice and prepared for the war, all of these would not have happened. Never would the beastmen armies invade the hinterland so easily. It was just like walking into an empty castle. Owing to just a wrong thought, The blood was flowing like a river. Bang! To think of the countless lives being sacrificed, was beyond my tolerance, and thus, I threw the heaviest punch I could, right on his face. Believing the villain, ignoring the earnest words, sitting aside while watching the invasion of beastmen. Arrogant and ignorant, committing all manner or outrage, willful and outrageous, do you deserve to be king? Bash! It was another punch, falling violently on the right side of his face. This time, a few teeth had fallen, Fismer's mouth was full of blood, he sobbed in tears, and started begging for mercy. Watching him beg for mercy just enraged me even more. In this war, I have seen countless heads hanging off trees, and I was afraid that they didn't even have a chance to beg for mercy. That aside, they wouldn't have even begged for mercy, they would go to any length to protect their families and homes. But this damned fatty before me, sitting aside to watch the country falling, keeping all military forces to protect himself, not even sending a fraction of his military forces to assist the other cities. Coward, selfish, foolish, non-visionary, do you think you're worthy to be king? Bash! This time, the violent punch had fallen on his stomach, it hurt so much that he had bent over like a prawn. Dissolute and dissipated, being promiscuous in the palace, you worthy to be king? Looking at the bewildered elven slaves at the front, I couldn't help to think of how Fismer, as a king, would indulge in slavery, which had invoked so much resentment, creating such a chaotic situation. Colluding oids the other races but bringing ruin to your own race, do you call yourself a king? To trade for beastmen ladies with the beastmen chief, he had removed the defending troops for the beastmen to snatch away the famed human beauties. I couldn't believe my ears, upon hearing the news, and never would one imagine that there was such a shameless king murdering his kin, usurping the throne. Do you call yourself a king? Unlike the royal families in the past, all of Fismer's siblings had died a miserable death. Before all of these disgusting crimes, how I was stabbed was but a trifle. More and more punches came down, I was getting more furious the more I attacked. If it wasn't because of this imbecile here, things wouldn't have come to this point. The spirit of mist that we had been guarding at all costs, wouldn't suffer such a humiliation. Just when all the people were striving to leave, how dare you surrender? How dare you surrender? How could you have the audacity to surrender? Over 2,000 years of Mist Kingdom history, and you're the first king to surrender. Clinging to life cravenly instead of braving death, abandoning honor and justice, and you call yourself a king? Why? Ah! A vicious arm, coupled with a leg, had shattered the backbone of Fismer, leaving him to lie prone on the floor, breathless. Nevertheless, this was just the beginning. Losing honor as a leader, losing people as a king, losing virtue as a man. I, Roland Mist, as the last descendant of Mist, hereby impeaches Fismer Koso. I, the Hellcoming the Frigid Nightmare, in the name of the first generation royal family, exempt the proposal of Fismer Koso, and propose that Roland Mist be the temporary Mist King. Chapter 167, History. Losing honor as a leader, losing people as a king, losing virtue as a man. I, Roland Mist, as the last descendant of Mist, hereby impeaches Fismer Koso. The former king's lion gestured with his hand, and with the help of the sonic wave ability, of which the frigid nightmares were all gifted fault with, my angry roar was spread to every corner of the entire city. The mangled king laid on the floor, but, enraged as I am, stood on the dais of the palace, and announced my decision to the world. The prepared sheepskin paper was spread out, the crimes that were little known were being read out, one by one for all to hear. The magical prestidigitation allowed these blood-like words to float in the air, catching even more attention. Crime number 1, in a cruel manner that lacked all compassion, the slaying of blood relatives. Of kin. Crime number 14, uncontrollably extravagant, wastage of resources, watching the people die of hunger and yet wearing clothes of silk and feasting to his heart's content. Crime number 15, collaborating with foreigners, bringing danger and enemies into the country. As one after another shocking crime was read out, the windows of every house opened, to listen to the announcement that came from the palace. The more I read, the more furious I became. Looking at the long list of remaining crimes, I did not feel like continuing anymore. I just tore it apart and started berating with the rage that bubbled from the bottom of my heart. We will take care of all these crimes, but most importantly, I cannot stand the sight of you weaklings anymore. Therefore, I demand that you get your ass off the throne as King of Mist. 1,700 or so years ago, Northland was a wasteland, with perpetual coldness. Wild beasts were everywhere, and all the bad conditions we see now, have remained unchanged since then. But at that time, this land was famous for being the land of exiles. Every country exiled their criminals here, and they usually died within 3 to 5 years. If any survived, then there were more trouble. Without any survival skills, a majority of them turned into bandits. Natural disasters, crimes, wild beasts all at once. Even if at that time Northland was not hell on earth, it was very close. Following Roland's description, and comparing it to the current scenario, the Mist people were starting to guess where this is heading. At that time, former King Ravendate, who had suffered under the hand of the bitter North, unexpectedly received the frigid nightmare contract and gained strength. He was determined to build a country of his own in this barren land. He never planned to be the great man who aspired to build a safe haven for humans. He just had had enough of those precarious days, and he hoped to build a land to call home for himself and his own kind, a home that protected them from the oppression and bullying from foreign races. As the sun rose slowly, the roars rang through the whole city. After the citizens were temporarily stunned into silence, Prince Roland's name and deep voice stopped the people in their tracks to listen attentively. During the beginning, everyone sneered at him for trying to bite off more than he could chew. They thought he was an idiot sleep-talking. And building a country here is equivalent to building a fortress at the front lines of the war between men and beastmen. The beastmen were certain to oppose its construction. And he, this penniless lad, who couldn't even take care of his meals, where would he find the resources and food for self-sustainability? However, there is no impossibility in this world. Ravendate, no matter how many hardships he had to experience, forced the impossible to become possible, and built his home on this frozen land. No valuable local products or riches. He believed that where there is a will, there is a way. He found himself a group of dwarves friends, and formed an engineering team of natives. Measuring inch by inch, digging spade by spade, they stubbornly found their own special local products in this barren land, magic minerals. No sturdy defense against the threats of the outer world. At the border, his followers and himself dug the gully and sentry by their bare hands, and replaced guarding troops on horses with their legs, and used their flesh and blood to build the other walls to protect their own people. The young people preparing to go to work, the woman preparing food for the family, the old man walking, when they heard these stories about their former king that were not recorded in the history books, they stopped in their tracks. Praise the former king. It is you, who pioneered our homeland, and allowed us to live with dignity. We admit that our lives were very hard, we had nothing in our pockets. I could not guarantee that after fighting so hard with me, that there will be any change, but what I know for sure, is that if we do not do anything just because there is no guarantee, then we will never do anything. If we must die in this cold and hunger, I hope that at least, I gave all I could give until the very last moment. That was what our former king said. In the harshness of nature, there were no miracles from heaven, no mysterious hope. All there was to rely on was yourself and your companions, and this was what that was known as the Spirit of Mist. And the Northlanders that were chosen by our former king to follow him became the earliest Mist people. We are different from the other ancient races, a majority of us have mixed ancestry. But what identifies us as Mist race, is never our bloodline or skin color. All Northlanders with a spirit of Mist, are considered Mist people. These are the true words from the mouth of our former king, and the truth that we, the descendants of Mist, always believed in. 1423 years ago, that was the first time Mist Kingdom almost faced annihilation. The demon army, as if appearing from our very own nightmares, broke open the gates that led to the underground. Uncountable demons and devils swarmed towards the gates. Overnight, 17 cities in Mist Kingdom were taken over. In Definder, the capital city, a state of emergency was announced, but the Mist people did not give up their homes. To protect their homes, they sacrificed countless lives, determined to send the demons back to where they came from. The marks of what had happened remain to this day, and that is the Amar, the abyss of demons. No, the most important mark and heritage left from that time is the war flag that is still dancing in the ravaging wind. That day, The spirit of mist and the war flags of mist were stained with the red color of blood for the first time. We went on to the development path that was completely different from the central Northland. Grit and perseverance became the most significant aspect of our culture. Unbending will and an unyielding temperament became the insignia we wore proudly. The citizens silently watched the war flags of mist that could be seen everywhere. A new feeling of appreciation slowly grew from within. Perhaps, what was passed down was not only blood, but a secret buried deep within, waiting to be revealed. 1129 years ago, there was a battle that involved many races. The beastmen who could no longer remain silent invaded the Northland. In that cruel winter, it was a war that no one expected, but it lasted for 12 long years. The Mist people lost 1,370,000 men in battle, and countless wounded. Most of the royal family members were lost, and as for lords who were responsible for protecting their homeland, the Mist Palace lost 4 kings and 7 royal members. The youngest lost was only 5 years of age. From the day he took the throne to the day he died in battle, it had been only 12 days. From then on, princes would always be the frontline generals of the army. Every young child must receive training of the sword and horse because we never know when he might need it someday. And once he goes on the battlefield, no matter his age, he had only 2 choices: to return to glory, or to die with dignity. Another new tradition that was formed was that when a king falls, his prince will assume the throne. If the prince has fallen, the princess will take his place, and when the princess has fallen, the queen shall lead. As long as the royal family survives, the defense will not stop. Since our beginning, we of the Mist bloodline will never be taken as prisoners, because our enemies know that taking us is pointless. After all, our ancestors have led us by examples. Surrender, be taken as prisoners. How can we, their descendants, disappoint our founders? We would rather kill ourselves. 700 years ago, the war that started out of a sudden, came like a dagger from behind. The sudden rise in foreign slave trade represented an endless blood stain, but it also represented endless wealth. And our Mist Kingdom stood on the path to treasure, therefore many superior weaponry fell into the hands of the Beastmen. After that war with the Beastmen, despite our torn homeland, we declared war with the many countries that were behind the war. Finally, HMPH. What are those weak Southerners against our cavalry that had gone through countless battles and wars? When our riders dragged their foolish bodies, with their crowns still on their heads, to parade them through our cities, no country ever dared to look down on us Mist people again. Of course, from then on, our relationships with the human countries never recovered, and we have never regretted. Time and time again, our calamitous countries suffered countless ransackings and wars. Without us noticing, we became a historical ancient kingdom. This is undoubtedly and unsurprisingly the perfect insult. The unattended wildflowers endured the bitterly cold of the Northlands and survived, yet those southern saplings who were so well taken care of, withered one after the other. 300 years ago, in a war that I experienced myself, ferocious and bloodthirsty beastmen, cunning and powerful demons, and those human comrades who always went back on their words, everything our ancestors faced, came all at once. That time, I failed, our defense failed, and our country was destroyed. The low voice tinged with a sob, that soundless suffering and remorse pierced the hearts of the citizens. In the city, the Mist people would always repeat the same answer, despite their different opinions. No, our prince, you have done excellently, we are proud of you, please do not condemn yourself. And look, here we stand. As long as the Mist people still live, how can the Mist Kingdom not be revived? Yes, we have not perished. The spirit of Mist never perish. Even if the Mist country has perished, our Mist race has not. Did you know, when there was news that there are Mist people forming Mist countries in the Northlands, I was so happy that I couldn't sleep. Even if it is no longer the kingdom I once knew, even if it were split to several lands, but as long as it stands tall in the Northland, I am satisfied. Countless of times, I couldn't sleep for days and nights when I thought of our homeland. But when the hatred for our destroyed homeland appeared in my thoughts, I made an oath. If I do not get revenge and make those murderers hiding behind the scenes pay tenfold for what we had lost, then I will not allow myself to live a peaceful life. All the people I know have died, and those who live in that homeland are no longer recognizable to me. Beloved Prince, please do not hesitate and wonder, This will always be your homeland, we are your family, and we welcome your return." I smiled, surrounded by such faithful and lovely people, how can I not smile happily? But when I look at the lump of lard in front of me, my joy turned to anger, and my wrath resurfaced. "But you, Fizmacaso, in your veins flows the spirit of mist, yet you did such despicable things. I used to hope that this is an impostor, one who is unrelated to the mist royalty. But after seeing him in person, and cast the spell that was passed down through the generations, I was shocked to find out that he is indeed of the Mist royal bloodline. The descendants of Mist have degenerated to such an extent. You, ostentatious, lustful and shameless. It is a good thing that Sloweaver knew how to be flexible. It was our inflexibility all those years ago that caused us so much pain. But being flexible does not equate to self-degradation, or getting involved with the extremely evil slave trade, or sending our people to be trampled on by beastmen. You call yourself a protector of the people? You are not worthy to be king. You, ingrate, greedy, traitor. You allowed our homeland to suffer so much humiliation, yet you hide in your palace and surround yourself with luxury and pleasure. The warnings I sent you were treated as trash. So many who should have lived are dead because of you. And yet you happily enjoy the offerings and gifts from the people. You have the audacity to claim that you are the leader of the people, the king who has the great responsibility to protect the land and its people. You are not worthy to be king. You are cowardly, despicable and dishonorable. The spirit of our ancestors have never faded. The ghosts of our ancestors are always watching us. If ghosts could materialize into our world, they would have murdered you already. How dare you surrender? The Mist royalty has 1,700 years of history. The ones who have perished in the battlefield are uncountable, and there was not one coward who dared to surrender. You are not worthy to be king. I, ancient frigid nightmare Hellcoming, Aoi, companion of former king, the first of the royal members, hereby witness the abdication of the king, and elect Roland Mist as the temporary holder of the throne. I will personally be responsible for being the warden." The citizens and royal guards were stunned for a moment, and then, a voice out of nowhere shouted, "Long live His Majesty Roland!" Suddenly the crowd exploded. "Your Highness Roland, no, Your Majesty Roland, welcome back! Your Majesty Roland, please do not hesitate, our gates are always opened for you." Very soon, with the driving force of some faithful subjects, the cheers rang out to all corners of the land and sky. I obtained the support of the citizens so easily. In a sense, it was thanks to Fizmar. Amongst the crowd, there was a couple of people grumbling and bickering. "Why must you force me to shout? Roland knows my voice well, he will definitely hear it, then he will laugh at it. You have teased him so many times, let him laugh." "Oh yes, how is the wound on your right arm?" "It's fine. That beastman shaman was injured worse than me." The others were just making up stories. This is no injury. When everything had been announced to the public, and the general situation has settled down, I mercilessly threw out the dying Fizmar out. Fizmar's high-pitched squeal shook the air. If he hit the ground, he would not survive. Some of the women and children had closed their eyes, unwilling to witness the horrific scene of smashed flesh. Yet I fixed my gaze at Fizmar, still not able to relax. Splash! As expected, just as Fizmar was going to crash to his death, two fleshy bat wings extended out of his back. With a strong flap of the wings, he glided from the ground and flew out of the city walls. Damn it! He's a Cambion. The prediction has been proven, but it was not a good news at all. The descendant of Mist mixed with the blood of demons. No matter how I thought about it, there could only be one possibility. Carwins. Is this all you're doing? Did you set this all up? Chapter 168, The Cambions. What are Cambions? Perhaps the Templar Cathedral have the most say in this matter. Those hybrid scums are born for destruction and conspiracies. They should all be dragged to the square and burned at the stake. Alright, I asked the wrong person. This generous and passionate pastor was obviously from the old school retro group. Until modern centuries, for some reason the Templar Cathedral had undergone an internal reform. Afterwards, whenever they were seen, the Cambions would just be condemned to life imprisonment, instead of getting burned to death. The steps of improvements taken by the Templar Cathedral were nothing better, but I have to say that this move was correct in a sense. Just as the name implied, Cambions were the descendants of devils and demons. Carrying miraculous power in their blood, along with ability to manipulate peculiar supernatural power, they were natural warlocks. Allegedly, half of the existing demon warlocks were Cambions of mixed parentage in the underplane. If the recessive blood of the other race was under control, they could be natural warlocks. However, if it went out of control and manifested traits of the devil, perhaps demi-devils or demi-demons best described these beings which were not supposed to live in the main plane. Unlike the bloodline of upper plane, angels, which people embraced and yearned for, the Cambions had always been a big trouble. Not only did the sucking of blood and the inclination for chaos faction was in their blood, but the bigger trouble was, the ancestors of their bloodline had committed all sort of outrages in the underplane. The angels resorted to orders and worshipped the gods. Their wills were not that strong to interfere with the lives of their descendants, and even then they were highly restrained. But in the eyes of the devils, their hybrid descendants were living treasures split off from their blood. The blood and strength derived from them were the best mark and linkage. The Cambions might be born kind, or a brave fighter, but with their devil ancestors whispering incessantly beside their ears, they would imperceptibly lean towards the chaos faction. In the eyes of the devils, the descendants who carried their blood were but good seedlings on the battlefield. They would call upon the innate devil of the descendants through the blood. The moment they crowed over their growing strength, was the time they lose control of their demonic impulse, and grow into demi-devils. In the end, they had no choice but to return to the underplane, serving as the new backbone of the devils. In the abyss of endless war, the young men whom they influenced, were undoubtedly the best pawns and war elites. The world had given Cambions the moniker of mongrels fated to be corrupted. Amongst all the planes, the reputation of these half-castes had never been good, as they had been mere pawns since 100 years ago. A Cambion might be kind at first, and carried out good deeds for half of his previous life. He was praised by all the people. However, his soul might be manipulated when the crunch came. Indeed, until here, the ins and outs of the matter were pretty clear now. Meanwhile, Elisa brought back news from the abyss. The Mist descendant in the north was the lineal descendant of a devil mogul. The Mist kingdom was divided into several pieces, with East Mist and Sluira being the biggest. That Cambion should reside in one of them. Previously, it was unknown as to which one was it. Therefore, I had no choice but to exercise vigilance further on Ren and suspended her from her duties. And now, it was obviously the royal member of Sluir. I had breathed a sigh of relief deep in my heart, despite that the situation was still unfavorable. And then, I kept my face straight again. Carwins, what do you want? My roar echoed to the skies. Even if Fizmakoso had 12 wings, but still, he would never escape from me. Right now, he was impaled by a sacred sword on the wall, clutching his chest in disbelief. No, I can't go back yet. I don't want to go back. I've yet to relish the beauty of this world, too many beautiful women and delicious food in the main plane. I don't want to go back yet. I'm not satisfied. I still want to be king. I don't want to die. The scales all over his body was emitting an uncanny white aura. His red pupils were gaining slight sign of pale yellow. This was the mark of the Prime Devil. Fizmar had unknowingly transformed from Cambions to Half-Devil. The Prime Devil could prevail upon their descendants through the bloodline and the linkage of souls. Perhaps in those simulated nightmares brought by the devil, Fizmar had fallen to the underplane for countless times. He had even harbored an illusion that he was part of the devils. Looking at the pale yellow pupils which were utterly demonized, I knew he could be saved no more. The corrupted soul such as him had nowhere to go than the Styx. Devil. The king. No, the puppet king was a devil. The royal guards had put down their weapons under the exclamation of the people. Nobody was willing to fight for Fizmar anymore. After all, the name of the devil had always been the common enemy of everyone. Answer me, Carwins, what do you want? Fizmar was dead, but I was still clutching his neck to interrogate, but the target I interrogated was the person hiding behind him. Ha ha! Along with the familiar laughter, dark flames were being radiated from Fizmar's body. Sensing the rage within me, the will of Devil Lord had finally descended. Along with that eerie laughter, suddenly, the sky was overcast by dark clouds, which had blotted out the sunlight. The rising sun could be seen no more. It seemed that even the gods were getting sick of this sight. This was not any magic, but just the influence of the descending will of Devil Prince towards the world. To witness such a wrath, I was a little surprised. Carwin's was much stronger than expected. Just the descending will is enough to change the weather? I'm afraid this is already a god-level existence. In my perspective, Carwin's prowess had gone beyond imagination, and would not be inferior to any god-level people in Chaos faction. Roland, I never thought we would meet this soon. How dare you ask me what I want? Fismer's body started to burn, albeit demonized. His body still couldn't bear the tremendous power of the Devil Prince. Nevertheless, Fismer's distorted face had given a familiar expression. That was a mischievous prank with innocence. Since you're so sincere in asking, I shall tell you benevolently. Oh wait. Did you really think I'm actually benevolent? Really wanna know? You guess. Guess your sister. 1, haha, isn't your sister mine too? Unfortunately, I would prefer an adorable sister to a brother. And if I answer you so easily, how disgraceful is that? And I'm a Devil Prince, if that is known by the rest, how could I be the leader? Let's be like always, leave the good play behind, the puzzle is meant to be solved in the very end. Burning vigorously in the demonic flame, the remaining body of Fismer turned to ashes, leaving a message behind. Roland, we will meet again very soon. Whoops. Should I start calling you brother? Seems that I still can't do that in your face. Ah, the time has come. I'll forget about this time, the sacred war had just begun. We have a lot of chances to play together. Slowly following the dissipating ashes, Fismer's ghost could be seen. As the devil mogul who had spoken his heart lost his medium of communication, everything quieted down again, and the dark clouds started to disperse. The sunlight shined in again. The peace was restored. Damn it! Breaking the ground with my heavy fist, however, my unreasoning anger was met to not receiving an answer. When the war in the north had just begun, the civil war of Sayuo had finally reached its end. The winner? There was no winner, although the crown faction who had always been in the middle, suddenly chose to side with Omar. The situation of this war remained miserable. Miserable was the best word to describe it. Because in this situation, if both sides continued fighting with all their power, in the end, it would be a mutual destruction, and there's certainly no winner. No matter what was the ending, both sides would suffer severe casualties. The war between undeads always went to the extent of obliterating the souls of each other. After losing myriads of its cadres, Zayuo Empire was bound to be reduced from a super kingdom to just another strong country. Nevertheless, with the sudden arrival of a small troop of knights in the battlefield to ambush the headquarters of the Council of Dark Knight, the scales were leaning towards victory. That wasn't because of how incredible they were, but now, the rising flag of mist now represented the span, and those red hounds were fighting as well, just for their owner, Emperor Yongai. At first, fellow undead warlords took them as the fake ones, as the history had indicated that the Red Hound army had miraculously disappeared during the Civil War. With the presence of the dreadful and gigantic Black Hounds amongst the Skeleton Knights, however, all the doubts were now meaningless. The demonic spatial hellhound, Bastion, is back, only his lordship could ride on it. There were even conspiracy theorists, speaking as they had seen through everything. All of these was the conspiracy of that person, Omar, Lionheart, Odank Carnivore. Gryle was once the retainers of his lordship. It must be he who urged the second senator to break the seal, and relied on his capability to stir up the civil war. The crown faction retrieved the crown when the time called for it. There's only one truth, and this must be the plot. Alright, not to discuss further on how these theorists could classify everything as part of the conspiracy, the emergence of the Red Hounds were undoubtedly a big deal, for after all, the return of Emperor Yongai had spread like wildfire, and if he really had returned, perhaps everyone should reconsider whom to side fault with. The only demigod-level undead emperor in recent history, if this banner hadn't instilled enough fear, he actually carried the dazzling ring of the mightiest necromancer of the time. Nothing was more concrete than this. There was an upper limit to the power of a necromancer or a lich. Perhaps to compute the combat power of a necromancer, one must take account of his or her undead's warriors. The limit of the Red Hounds of Emperor Yongai was never known, as they were never defeated. In other words, nobody had known how far the power of Emperor Yongai could go. The truth was, The infallible Defender was one of the trump cards that had been hidden by Roland. Keeping its secret deliberately, Roland had only used it twice, and the opponents who had seen it were dead. The standard tactics of the necromancers were to use his very best undead warriors as the bodyguards as well as the vanguards in battle, diverting attention from their enemies. And then, they would cast the most powerful magic to blast the entire battlefield, seeking to end everything in one blow. Emperor Young I was doing likewise, with the Red Hound being the bodyguard as well as vanguard, and with Icehen being the most powerful and victory-decisive magic, that would be unstoppable for one. There weren't a lot of semi-god sorcerers, and the ones who could manipulate such level of destructive forbidden curses, could be counted on just 5 fingers, but to cast the forbidden curse was like throwing vegetables, regardless of its consequences and damage towards himself. There was none other than Emperor Young I, even after all these years. More than 10 fallen kingdoms had witnessed the strength and slyness of this tactics. Should one not break the seal of Red Hounds before Emperor Young I completed his forbidden taboo casting, it was feared that even entire cities and armies would fall into an everlasting slumber. In those years, the Young I's army wasn't even required to attack the castle. Once Emperor Young I started to wield the curse, the fate of the war was pretty much sealed, and the aftermath of it would include dozens field operations in which the survivors attempted to launch insane attacks upon the defending undeads. To fight an attrition war with the endless undead army, was none other than a time-limited combat where death awaited. Those formidable armies with profound history had always fallen under the hands of skeleton soldiers due to exhaustion, and this cunning combination of tactics was indeed the best example. Some cadres in the Council of Dark Knight were the main forces of Young I's army in the past, when they not know the habits of Emperor Young I to give full consideration before making any move. The decisive battle should not be avoided without having more than 60% chances of victory. Victory or defeat should already be decided before the war begun, and then, the enemies would be wiped out aggrievedly. This battle style of this emperor had always been such dreadful. The moment Red Hounds charged into the battlefield, was the time Emperor Young I was going to harvest the victory of war with his own hands. The fellow undead warlords had always derived pleasure from seeing how their enemies vanished, but to stand in front of the emperor, who was probably in the preparation of forbidden curse. I'm having a little stomach ache, I must answer the call of nature now. Hey, you were skeleton sorcerer, since when did you had a stomach? My wife is about to give birth, I've to go back now. A Death Knight had said so. It was a short sentence, but carried a big hidden message. The spectators were startled. My lover is about to give birth too, I also want to go back. Alright, another Death Knight was getting shameless too, but afterwards, the two who should fight each other had given a look of Freemasonry. How could you be so shameless? I'm learning that from you. Alright, the situation was clear without needing any more explanation. In the end, feeling the heat of Emperor Young I again, the influence which was established by the Council of Dark Knight after toils and moils, was completely extinguished. When the Red Hounds had reached the headquarters, it was an empty building. The civil war of Ziyuo Empire had come to an end. The news about the second consuls, Feynman fleeing far with most of the armies from the undead plane, had very soon reached the ears of the whole world. Just when Roland was getting so bogged down on the chaotic scene before him, in another plane, there was somebody laughing gleefully. What I did? I did nothing, I was just playing. Fismer is my descendant, of course, he's a Cambion. Sigh, thought he would be a good part, to think that he would become like this after just a few rounds of game. Mortals, so fragile. The laughing young man was rather handsome, and his laughter was natural too, but to behave like so in a situation like this, that was certainly abnormal. To think the expression of a brother at that time, I had no words. Guess? I myself haven't figured out the answer. How would you guess it? He was lying on the void, and the void had nothing at all. The only thing which caught the eyes, was the huge chessboard, with all his chess, pawn, above it, that was quite a spotlight. The chess was lives, which were all souls railing in agony, and amongst them, with the power which could match the legends, They were probably the very heroes in the secular world. And opposite him across the chessboard, there sat nobody, but the chess pieces were moving on their own. Northland? The Mist Country? Conspiracy? Nothing to do with me. I'm just looking forward to some happy games. My fellow cuties, show me what you got, don't disappoint me like Fismer. Hope so. Perhaps, due to his willfulness, Carwins could be promoted to his level in such a brief time. No goods, no bads, everything was whether fun or not fun. Should the mood be good, he would put down a few chess pieces, and dispatch several cadres of his to rebuild the Mist Kingdom. Should the mood be bad, he would flip the table and do nothing. In a sense, this trait of Carwin's was, in fact, the nature of chaos. The flawless chaos devil, the blue-eyed boy of the chaos, the loved child of the goddess of chaos. Whoever dared to call him so had been dead for long. All of these were the monikers gained by the Carwins in the underplane. Doing things in a capricious style, yet able to smile like an innocent kid when creating disasters of which even the devils couldn't bear the sight. This son of the abyss, who was completely in character for chaos, had made tremendous feats in just 300 years. Stepping over countless corpses, he ascended to the highest sanctuary. He had now earned an, even more, resound name, the supreme ruler of the chaos, the 14th existence of god level in chaos faction. Roland's prophecy was absolutely wrong, to think that even Carwins didn't know what he would do next. And now, Carwins listened to the commands of no one except the goddess of chaos, who was asleep. When the will to play surged within him, there was no one who could stop his game. This time, brother is playing with me, what a pleasure. Haha, defeating brother in a strategic game, this has been one of my dreams. Brother, you are a good guesser, so guess what's my next step, even I haven't thought of it. To be continued. TL Note 1. In Chinese, your sister, is rude way of retorting one sentence which you consider silly, done by appending sister behind the keyword said by that person. Chapter 169, Pride. Foolish apes, how dare you despise my existence, I am the omniscient magic mirror. Is that so? What's the answer for 1,692,321 times 768,392? Answer that in 3 seconds. 10,300,365,917,832. Impressed, kid? You thought that my almighty creator will forget to equip me with a calculator? After hearing that, the silver-haired muscular guy was stunned, but he did not answer. He was still counting. Let's assume that you are correct. Let me tell you, it's not because I can't calculate it out. Father taught me multiplications before. Just from the looks, this good-looking muscular guy was behaving like a living hero from a classic mythology. He was tall and fit, thickly built, and had delicate features on the face. Well, this may be contradictory, but isn't there something strange known as Ligudan 1, in this world? Now, the next question, besides my dad, who is the most beautiful in this world? Of course it is you, our honorable Lord Omar. Your beauty comes only after Lord Roland. Haha, you are really very honest, I kinda like you now. Have you eaten lunch yet? Want to have it together later? Haha, although you are exceptionally handsome, seems like there is something wrong with your head. I am a mirror, how am I going to eat? Looking at the half-naked thick-built guy who was counting his fingers, while making various bodybuilding posture facing the mirror, caused Reinhard to feel nauseous even though he did not possess a stomach anymore. This is just a perfect match. I'm impressed of King Roland, just a small present and he managed to tame this stubborn Omar. That muscular body shone with an oily gloss, but then the face had the delicate features of a cute girl. Furthermore, it was 70% alike to Roland. In a sense, Omar's existence was the dark past of Roland. Yes, Beligudan before the eyes was the pride of 7 deadly sins. It couldn't be blamed that he looked like this. Roland used the standard template of specters to create his own 7 deadly sins. Envy and gluttony were made using sewed up abomination as a base, while pride from the 7 deadly sins was the same as gluttony, a mutated spirit based on Banshee. According to the initial design, he was an artificial soul who had no face, body nor gender, but as he grew, surprisingly he selected this as his appearance. Actually, it was caused by Roland, who talked nonsense during his birth. As a man, only a muscular body is the true beauty. Well, as a result, The muddled pride viewed it as his gospel. And as the instinct of every life sees the mother as the most beautiful existence, without any doubt he used the face of Roland, and as everyone knew, Roland died too young, and the portraits he left was mainly from 11 to 12 years old. And in the end, this is how a child with aesthetic deviation was born. Originally, if there were some slight misunderstandings, it was still possible to rectify, but in those years Roland was too busy to start a war. Omar would not listen to others, and as a result it got worse and worse, and finally ended up being the most beautiful form of himself. Parents understood more than the children themselves. Nobody understood Omar more than Roland. That was why by customizing a flattery magic mirror, he could easily manipulate the few-year-old child. Yes, only a few years old, only after a few years from birth he got sealed for rebelling, and during the sealed period he did not age. When he was released, his temper was just same as he was before sealed. While the civil war of Shiloh ended, as the only victor, it seemed that Omar would be in control of this country very soon, and with his ability, he would bring this country and himself to greatness. The ability of pride, Omar. Actually, it would be very complicated to explain that. It was actually a very peculiar ability system, not only a soul ability. Pride originated from different levels, based on the understanding of Roland, as a superior that dominated the life and death of the inferior. They often did not reason with the inferiors, thinking that they can look down on the inferior like hints from above. This was the root cause of how pride became one of the original sins. There were ranks for specters too. If so, wasn't it possible to create an innate ruler of the dead who was born with the ability to rule over the immortal specters? Undoubtedly this was a queer topic, but Roland got his inspiration from the natural domination of Queen Bee and Queen Ant. They used a peculiar pheromone to build a network and used an intriguing method to take control of the whole group, causing the group to be dedicated to sacrifice themselves for their queen, even until death. And the reason of selecting banshees as the standard template was because banshee was the few rarer spirits which did not have low levels of existence, and the fact that they were composed by pure spirits was also very suitable to create a spiritual network. In the end, the final result of the research was Omar. He was the only one who did not use any additional materials. A specter entirely created by Roland himself. In a sense, calling Roland his father was not wrong at all. The supreme power of Spectre Network, this was what the combination ability of Omar was called. He could use the specters under him to construct a spiritual network to exchange information constantly, and as the supreme power of the network administrator, he could control every specter under him. This is the only ability of Omar. It did not sound so powerful, but it was unexpectedly powerful when used. Low-level specters did not have any intelligence, while he could grant them fake intelligence. In a battlefield, he was like an invisible hand of command, which could even command the specter under him to perform minor movements, such as moving the fingers slightly. To gain consciousness, a normal specter needed to be at least silver ranked, while he could let countless specters to possess fake consciousness. It could be said that under his control, the battle power of low-level specters which was only capable to be used as cannon fodder will at least be tripled. And this was just the beginning. Omar's powers were not that simple. Spirit is power. The spirit of low-level and high-level specters will be connected to the specter network, and how would someone such as him, who controls other specter spirits, be weak? Granting fake consciousness will not increase his burden. On the contrary, this lets him extract spiritual power to strengthen himself further. With 300 low-level specters under him, Omar would have around bronze rank battle power. With 3,000 specters, Omar would be able to match silver rank warriors. With 30,000 specters, he could crush gold rank humans easily. When there is a spectral empire, his strength would be immeasurable, even for his creator Roland himself. From this, one could tell that Omar's power was leaning towards army battles. From the beginning, Pride Omar was designed as the commander of Spectre Army. The effort Roland spent was also a few times more compared to other 7 deadly sins. His expected design did not fail, and the reason it had some issues was affected more by the problem of his personality. I was born to be the top amongst those under father. Why should I be listening to you old folks? How is that dumb mud qualified to sit in my place? and command the army which I should have controlled. I'm gonna take back my specter army and build a nation that belongs to specters. This is the duty I was born for, and it is also Father's expectations. We were born to be kings. Well, to a specter formed from grudge, the crankier the soul the greater the potential. But if the personality was too extreme, naturally there would be no way to discipline them, and in the end, it will end up to be the rebellion of naughty brats. But in a sense, in those years Roland did not leave any room for maneuvers, therefore it was still possible to communicate. Only the 7 deadly sins and Roland himself understood the true power of Omar. The other Spectre Lords only thought that he had very powerful undead control ability. The Shiloh Civil War was meant to happen the moment Fitterland, who underestimated him, handed him the Spectre army. He could even accept his own brother Bastian to have a higher ranking than him. For Omar, who was arrogant, how could he accept an old Lich above himself? Hence, as predicted by Roland, when Omar was released by Fitterland, the second Archon of Shiloh, it was as if they have set a time bomb for their own destruction. Apparently, as the civil war in Shiloh came to this extent, a choice was needed to be made. So, Roland made a choice in advance, letting Omar ascend the throne, and sent Fitterland into the Spectre plane. At this moment, it was time for Omar to repay him. I understand Father's intentions, and I loved his present. After I reorganize, I will fulfill my promise, and send armies to the northern lands to help Father with the war. Originally it was Roland who sealed Omar. Reinhardt thought that this would be hard to deal with, but surprisingly it seemed to be going smoothly. Hearing this, Reinhardt hesitated instead. He was worried if Omar will plot something. It seemed like Omar sensed Reinhardt's hesitation, so he added, "When I was sealed, I had time to think, and maybe I went too far indeed, in those years. And for Father, who was all along unforgiving for betrayers to spare me, I should appreciate that." Spare him? Didn't King Roland say that with the special ability of Omar, he could only be sealed, but cannot be killed? Reinhardt was filled with doubt. Could only be sealed but cannot be killed? For the Almighty Father there is no such thing. The 7 deadly sins were all created by him. He would have left something up his sleeve. At least being unable to control other 7 deadly sins is one of my weakness. And, although speaking of his own weakness, but the smug look on face was as if he received blessings, and suddenly Lagudan. Ahem! Omar turned shy. With a big muscular body, but blushing like a girl, the pretty face showed some mysterious blush. And, I also needed Father's help, to create another of my kind. I just entered puberty stage this year, and I also want to fall in love. Furthermore, while speaking, Li Gudan shook his body vigorously, twisting his huge body, with the blushing face, and started daydreaming while closing his eyes, as though he had thought of something embarrassing. My request is not much at all, as long as they are not short like dwarves. If they are as tall and strong and pretty like me, that would be enough. Yes, they can be stronger than me by all means, but their looks mustn't fall too far. A thickly built body plus a pretty face would be lovely. PFFT. At that moment, Reinhardt was so envious of the weak humans. At least they had the ability to die from spitting blood, while he could only endure the rolling thunder before his eyes. Although feeling shy, but now that I'm the king, having a few more choices seemed to be fair. I had dreamed of organizing the I'm proud, I have posture, competition under the moonlight. To say this out makes me really shy. For a moment, Reinhardt extremely regretted his outstanding imagination. He imagined that if this request is granted, every day, there will be a bunch of pretty muscular brothers making bodybuilding postures under the moonlight. Reinhardt had an urge to bang the wall to death. Burp. An understandable nausea, and the colleagues behind who were starting to fall to the ground retching proved that even for specters, there were thresholds for disgust. I will inform the king. And, kindly stay away from me, Lord Omar. I have no interest in muscles. TL Note, 1. Li Gudan, is also, Nize, in a Chinese anime, featuring a cute girl with muscular body. Chapter 170, The Elf Outcast. Situated in the Northland, sparse of resources, Tassel Kingdom of the Elves was nevertheless a great place, which was hard to come by. The renovated cliff and magic crystal wall became the artificial barrier of the capital, Santander. The endless hardy old pine trees served as the best shelter from wind, The ancient spirit of the elves contained magical water, which flowed into streams, bringing warmth and vitality in this land, and also turning it into one rare green vitality in Northlands. Just as humans in the north were getting upset of the winter beasts and hunger, the elven natural priests and hunters had tamed them into tractable livestock. Just as all countries in the north were endeavoring throughout the year to prepare the winter rations, the fruit trees under the manipulation of elven ancient tree, were able to produce fruits thrice a year, producing all sorts of the sweet and delicious fruits that grew regardless of the seasons. These fruits were not exported and traded for mineral resources. In time, they would rot away. A centipede does not topple over even when dead. The elven kingdoms which had inherited the legacy of the elves were contemptuous of the humans as they had the background of nouveau riches. For them, 100 years was just an instance due to their longevity. Having tremendous time and skills, had they not improved their living environment, those wild elves in the night novels who lived above the trees, were merely an artistic ornament. Just when the main forces of the tassel were galloping amongst the snowland, their territory was as peaceful as ever. The young unicorns and flying horses were playing in the forest. The elven civilians still had the leisure time to carry out their winter ceremonies. So what about the battle at the front line? They were confident that the mighty alliance of the four elven kingdoms would never fall to the ordinary humans, not to mention their very elites were going all out this time. The truth was so, the 100,000s of elven armies were a small number, but due to their very high average combat power, just an elite troop of theirs could match the royal guards of the other countries. Even their ground force was of formidable soldiers and should not be underestimated. This was the foundation of the elves. Even today, the weakness of the elven kingdom, which had inherited the ancient magic and arts, was none other than their population. It took an elf 200s to reach adulthood, and this period was enough for humans who married relatively earlier to come up with 6 or 7 generations. A war was fought with comprehensive country power. The population and resources were one of the important factors, as casualties were unavoidable, for even the mightiest sorcerer would perish in combat or under friendly fire, and such a loss would take almost 200 to 300 years to be regained. The Achilles heel of the elves was none other than their inability to fight in a war of attrition. And this time, if the main forces suffered tremendous casualties, the elves would have to undergo a very long time of recuperation. It could be said that the northern elves would go to any length as they had cast all their lots on the victory of this battle. In the absence of their main forces, the role of city border patrol was transferred to the rangers who had formed a second-class army, or an adventure squad. A wild elf ranger, 2 to 3 centaur archers, 1 to 2 elven warriors, were the members of a typical elven patrol squad. If it was a first-class battle squad, 1 to 2 elven ancient trees, natural priests and flying horse knights would be added, and the strength of those units was certainly on another level. Even amongst the elves, there weren't many druids who preferred to live on trees, compared to the cities. In any place, as long as there was the presence of intelligent beings, the trees would always be one of the most important resources. Not only they could achieve the basic functionalities of construction and furniture, they were also the basic ingredients of the artwork of the elves. Furnished with precious forest regions which were unusual in Northlands, the exported exquisite wood produced by the elves had earned a lot of foreign currency. If the druids who treated forest protection as the most sacred duty were easily amenable to reasoning, they would not be classified as terrorists by all the other countries. The druids were bigoted, the elves were bigoted too. It was inconceivable how bigoted the combination of both the elf and druids was capable of. Their extreme nature protection organization was the origin and mentor of the other green terrorists. All sorts of their secret acts were even graced as the epitome to take an example from. The moniker of anti-lumbering little bear lions would sound adorable, but it had been there for more than 10,000 years. They had been referring to the druids terrorists, which brought the elves much headache. They had the esoteric bear transformation arcane and beast training arcane. Perhaps any gray bears within the forest could be one of them spying on you, while you hummed a song, chopping wood. In the end, the elves were not only the source of the druids, but also made up most of the druids. However, most of the druids would still have an outward occupation which was acceptable by the world. At this time, however, within the temporary campsite, Tasia the elven ranger, who was humming her little tune while preparing dinner, was actually a hidden druid master, and was also a member of the Little Bear Alliance, but lately, she had not been fulfilling the sacred duties of national protection. The feats that those pets Tasia had domesticated cost money. She had thus put earning money first, sacred duties second. To be recruited by the Elven Kingdom to carry out some not-so-perilous military tasks and fill the spot of kingdom armies, was indeed a bargain. At this crucial moment, the Elven Kingdom would no more be niggardly. The doubled recruitment fee during the war was alluring for countless mercenaries. Ha! This time we're really making money. To think that merely patrolling could make so much money. I hope the war would last longer. I still expect the cowards within the city to increase the recruitment fees. Should the war be elevated, the recruitment fee would increase threefold, or even tenfold. Tasia spoke something uncharacteristic of the elves, but the centaurs amongst her troops had already gotten used to her personality, and on the contrary, they who held a lower stand in the Elven Kingdom, would prefer her straightforward and amiable character, compared to the other arrogant elven aristocracies. Don't speak such a thing in the city, those self-important elves would be displeased. Centaur Bull chucked after counting his recent soaring stipends. He was in a good mood. In the past few years, the army on duty was not so relaxed. They had to venture into the wild across the mountains in pursuit of the slave hunting groups. It was not an easy task. In the case of running into any sword saint or senior magic automaton instructor sent by the big human countries, the pursuer might become the prey. Also in that time, quite a number of patrol squads have gone missing. Tasia laughed even more happily. Indeed, those slave hunters will bother me no more, they created so much trouble. Pitiful, Princess Suana. How pitiful, how could a good person not end well? Recollecting her figure which was as tender as water, even Tasia, who was sick of the elves, had nursed a grievance. About that matter, I heard a rumor. Just a rumor. Grover, the silent elven warrior popped out, but his words had caught the attention of the comrades. After a moment of hesitation, Grover finally spoke up. The rumor says, there are few doubtfulness about the kidnapping of Princess Suana. The elven troops who were supposed to safeguard her was pulled over for military training, and the rangers had started to undergo a close training. Even the Moonglaive Royal Guards was transferred to the border to take care of some disputes. All of these had given the chance for the slave merchants, who were not particularly strong, to capture the Princess Suana. Hearing this, members of the small squad had sunk into a peculiar silence. Of course, they knew this rumor. For the past few weeks, this topic had been circulating around any restaurant or market. The implication behind the rumor was quite evident. The demise of Princess Suana was but within the scheme of Elven King and the Council. Rather than saying that Suana was dead in the hand of humans, in fact, she was offered by the ruthless Elven King as the sacrifice of war. Let's avoid words without proof, or else we would get into trouble. To think that Tasia, who had just spoken uninhibitedly, turned out to advise Grover to tread carefully, and just when her words faded, the amiable elven warrior cracked a laughter. No proof? The two legendary warriors in royal guards were suddenly transferred. Isn't that proof? Unrode the hand of Kashmir, who had an intimate relationship. The princess even created a havoc in the army because of this. He had allegedly smashed the signboard of the army. Grover was obviously one who supported the peace-pursuing faction of Princess Suana. They who went through an outrage, in the beginning, had now cooled off to think about the root cause of the death of the princess, and also discovered the few dubious points. According to what that was spoken by the humans, the brains behind the political schemes are always those who would benefit the most from these events, and in this event, the humans had derived no benefit at all. The only one who benefited from this were none other than the war-pursuing faction of the elves. That man is incredibly ruthless. Princess Suana was his daughter. All right, these words were blunt enough, when it came to rebuking the Elven King directly. In an instant, the temperature of the campsite fell drastically, and everyone became silent. After all, it was not good for the civilians to participate in such matters. The spies and scouts were not exclusive to just the humans. To be imprisoned due to loose tongues was quite a misfortune, and all sufferings could be spoken to no one afterwards. Not to mention, Tasia, who was actually a druid, would not be intrigued by this matter. Despite her pity for the princess, she would not go out of her way to fight for her. And thus, she was trying hard to stop his words. Ah, there is a dark elf. Alright, would dark elves appear within the elven kingdom? That was obviously a bluff but had unexpectedly amused Gregor. He laughed while shaking his head. Just don't talk about it if you don't want. Out here, where would you find dark? Before he could finish his words, he had fallen on his face with his eyes rolled back. A dark green dagger was stabbed in his back. Though I don't know how you discovered me, since you have, I shall not let you go back alive. A figure wearing dark armor emerged from Gregor's shadow. The dark skin sufficed to explain everything. A dark elf is here for real? Perhaps, I should consider being a prophet. Just as Tasia was regretting her bad mouth, the dark elf scout in front of them, who was about silver rank, again flashed his dagger, which was coated with paralyzing poison. In her eyes, that was possible to wipe out an ordinary patrol squad, but taking account of her hidden legendary power, the scout before her was merely a trash with a combat power of 5. Aha! Take my rolling pin. The truth went on like the expectation. The dark elf who was confidently moving was struck down by Tasia's rod after just saying a hello. Never would he imagine that an elven ranger with a crossbow possessed such marvelous skill with a rod, with this paralyzing thunder shock that came from that wood rod. Little lad, you dare to flaunt yourself in front of me. Guys, let's move, the situation doesn't look good. He might have accomplices. The words left were unnecessary, as a number of shadows surging out from the forest had revealed the truth. Again, it had proven the prophetic talent of Tasia. Tasia, please talk less. Now, the party was running at full speed. Considering that she in the past had always spoken ill of the elves, the centaur running in front of them all was filled with a grudge. However, his words were not answered. Turning to look back, Tasia had vanished. What remained there were some gray bears which were dozing off, and all his comrades had fallen to the ground except the vanished Tasia. Faint. Right after hearing a voice, a dark gray light flashed and he had lost his consciousness and tumbled down too. At this moment, a dark elven priest riding on black armored war Scorpio, approached the fallen bodies. Behind her back, there were tens of elven scouts with bewildered faces. Stupid males, couldn't even take care of such a weak sacrifice. Should the great plan of Spider Queen be effected, I will cut you all into pieces and feed the poisonous spiders. Before the eyes, it was the dark elven priest delivering rebukes, but far away, there were sounds of bang-bang percussion. Apparently a ranger but having a great identity, Tasia, whose adventure experience was vast, knew that it was the marching sounds of a massive horde of septal riders, which could only be afforded by powerful clans. There was only one possibility of using such an amount of septal riders: the superior priest of Lorsai and Grey septal riders. Damn it! This is certainly not the hunting troop looking for sacrifices. This is the entire army of the Dark Elves. To attack the Elven Kingdom at this moment, is Lorsai insane? Obviously, it wasn't the time for any laments. Just as Tasia, disguised as a gray bear, was about to leave, was spotted by the female priest. Humphrey, it's not my first day mimicking an animal, I'm a professional. But straight away, she realized the dark gray light was being concentrated around the 9-head whip of the priest. She started to be panicked as if she had discovered something. Forgive me, sister, I will repay you in the future. She clenched his teeth and started biting her fallen comrade, closing her eyes. Humphrey, this is exactly how my little who took its food, witness my godlike acting. They should have gone away. When she opened her eyes, however, not only had those dark elves remained or turned away from her, but on the contrary, they were actually staring at her. Puke, wahaha, there's even a vegetarian bear. This druid is amusing. The lady priest was rolling with laughter on the back of the armored war Scorpio, and now, Tasia just realized she wasn't eating the right thing, and subsequently, she looked forward and realized that Gregor had awakened and was staring at her in astonishment. That was a close call. When Gregor had gotten rid of the effects of the paralyzing poison, dodging the big bloody mouth, Tasia had bitten off a stack of grasses and started swallowing. Obviously, she who tried to hide her gustation wouldn't taste anything, and so she had bit off the grass twice. Humphrey, I'm just a bear who loves eating grasses. Why, is there any rule restricting bears from eating grasses? Take my sky-flipping bear paw. Alright, Tasia, who always came up with disgraceful acts at the critical moment, had again proven that fact correct. She flew into a shameful rage.